You have spent a lot of your life in and around because of your father's work as both somebody who works with funeral homes and operates a crematory. You have been around, and there's no easy way to say this, dead fucking bodies.
Dead people. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then, Derek and I spend a lot of our time watching horror movies, and you have too, where there are just bodies galore. Buckets of blood. Literally, there are movies that are called Buckets of Blood, at least the one. So the point is, I have a couple questions for you about a trope versus does that happen?
Shoot.
Okay. The first one I'll give you. A lot of people in horror movies, their faces get spattered with blood, but like it pours on them, especially Evil Dead. Like in Evil Dead 2, a wall explodes with blood and it fountains onto Ash, and it's probably 500 gallons of blood on him at one point. And he just kind of it wipes itself away. But the trope is that they wipe their eyes of blood and then they can immediately see. Blood's pretty thick. Do you think that that's real?
I mean, do you think I'm around a lot of people as they're actively getting murdered or...
You know what I'm remembering is we talked about watching Dexter, you and I, on a cold open from earlier in this series. And in that, we talked about the fact that you might be a psycho murderer.
Oh, dear God.
So
why are you going to out me like that in such a public way?
I didn't. You just did.
I got to go.
Okay, another question. Because you deal with the bodies are in a freezer, do bodies that are frozen shatter like glass?
I don't know. Drop one and see.
Well,
I haven't been that reckless yet.
That's probably good for
you've passed.
business.
I think the age that you would try to do that, you've passed.
Well, when I was younger, you don't want to touch them. You want to look because of morbid curiosity, but you never want to touch.
In like 25, 30 years, Carly's going to enter her midlife crisis and she's going to go try to shatter. My words are going to, I'll have been long dead, but her words.
Maybe she'll try and shatter your body.
I give total permission.
That's a great idea.
Final question. Do they ever get up and do a little dance?
Every time.
Every time what?
Every time.
Hello and welcome back to your sacrifice to the old gods, called the Third Channel Podcast,
where we delve into the horror franchises you love from the perspectives of a lifelong horror fan
and a newbie to the genre. I'm the fool, PJ.
And I'm the schmoobie, Derek.
That's good. And the only thing that we're here to talk about today, like every time you tune back in, is horror.
I mean, would that make me the scholar, I guess?
The schmoobie?
Yeah. In the terms of the cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
You'd be the alpha.
Oh. Yeah. That's the first time ever in my life.
Or the virgin. It depends on how it is.
Yeah, you're right.
Hold on, wait, look at him, see if he's crying.
Guys, there's tears.
Oh, another voice. Who is that?
I don't know.
No, it was your normal voice.
Who am I?
I don't know. Let's make this character. My girlfriend Carly is here.
Hello.
We have our first guest.
We have our first guest.
I'm honored.
I'm very happy that you said yes to do this. This is a rare movie that I saw this with not Derek long before we started watching all the Scream movies and the Evil Dead movies. This is one that we watched. What was that? Probably about 6 years ago.
Yeah, 2019.
Yeah. And it was, I, as our listeners know, balk under the pressure of scary stuff at about that time, only until very recently, where like the Manchurian Candidate, if it's a horror movie, I just turn off and I'm not fazed by anything. And then I kick back on. I wonder where all that stuff is going, all those ideas and like planned out murders. I wonder where all that stuff is going when I'm watching those movies.
Probably a good place.
I'll use it for good. You are somebody who has always liked horror. Pretty effectively like a schmoobie yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How long has horror been a thing?
Well, I'm going to be 30 this year. Started watching horror when I was about 8. So I'm bad at math, so you guys go ahead and do that.
Okay.
I will not.
What movie did you watch?
The very first movie that I watched was George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, followed quickly by every single one of the Chucky films. They're good.
That's funny that you mentioned that. We'll let it out right now.
Yeah.
That's the next franchise we're doing.
I think we even have said that before. And if we have, this is a double reveal, which is twice the fun, twice the reveal.
Okay, so obviously a zombie movie, one of the best, if not the best, as one of your first.
Absolutely.
And then Chucky. All right. I mean, who was allowing you to watch these things?
Oh, that would be my dad. All-star dad.
Yeah, he must be.
Yeah.
And he was fine with it.
Oh, he actually encouraged it. It's funny. My mother used to get very angry if she found out that, because we had split custody. So I'd be going over to my dad's house. She'd ask me, hey, what are you and your dad going to do? I'd be like, oh, well, we're going to go to the movie theater. We're going to go see a movie. She's like, well, what are you going to go see? I was like, we're going to go see a scary movie. Oh, she would be livid. She hated it. She would call my dad. She'd be like, Sean, you are going to ruin this child. Be like, you're going to give her nightmares. I was just like, leave me alone, lady. Leave me alone.
He's like, the movie's just Seed of Chucky. There's nothing inappropriate about this. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Is that, okay, so, because man, that's such a different experience that I had growing up. My parents were not into horror. I mean, they knew that I was into horror and they were like, okay, you go do your thing over there.
That sucks.
And yeah. Like I didn't have that to share with them. I mean, there was several movies over the years that I had to drag my dad to, unfortunately, to see in theaters because it was like, Freddy vs. Jason, I had to see in theaters. I just wasn't old enough to go by myself. I wasn't going to miss that. That was the battle of the universe, Like,
did your dad like it?
I don't know.
What did he give it on Letterboxd? Plug your dad's Letterboxd?
He doesn't have one, but I'll
at that D Rosenberg dad.
The Freddy v. Jason house at Horror Nights. Yeah. I don't know if you remember seeing that one. Oh, nightmare. Not in the good way. It's awful. Nothing but screens.
That's another thing that you
real bummer
talked me into doing, which is completely shaped the way every time I talk about horror with her, whether it's something about a Horror Nights fun fact that I've learned, that we're talking about Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando, or if it's a movie that I've seen or a franchise that we've started or whatever, and I'm talking to her about that, she always gives me that like withering look of just like, I got you into this.
Yeah.
Like,
I stand a little taller each time.
It is the joke of if we make any money from this, which would be great. Tubi, sponsor us. Well, I always say it should be for no money. No, sponsor us for money now. We're a big deal. We've been on a blog once. But that is something that you've also been doing for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Is that another dad inclusion?
Yeah, that was probably after, I don't know, maybe 10 or so years of watching horror movies with my dad, finding out that there is a horror event that models houses, because haunted houses were something that I used to do since I was very young, which is funny because, my mother didn't like me going to horror movies, but she had no problem having me work in Guavaween, which is arguably the most inappropriate and dangerous event that can happen during October in Tampa. So it's like a raunchy version of Mardi Gras, which I know that sounds kind of redundant. It's not. There are titties everywhere. So we used to do the haunted house every single year. So that wasn't something that was too unfamiliar from me. So my dad's like, oh, okay, you've been working in them. Let's go ahead and throw you, as a guest into one.
Which that makes sense.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah, Horror Nights is, I mean, we've talked about it before, but that is one, it's my favorite thing ever.
Oh, it's incredible. Top tier.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Truly.
Sure is.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so you would go, is this a movie, is Cabin in the Woods something that you watched with your dad originally?
Yeah, 100%. We went to go see it in theaters, and I will never forget it. This movie kind of stood out more than any other film that I think or I had watched on my own, just because so many tropes were thrown into it at once. This is something that was kind of unparalleled at the time, and still even today, racking my brain, I can't really think of something that's matched it exactly.
This level of meta.
Yeah, it's kind of like its own thing. So it really kind of cemented a special place in my heart when I was very young. So then now I even get a better appreciation now that I'm older, and I recognize a lot more of the references that I did when I was in high school. And
it's so funny because that's what I'm going through. This is the second time I've seen this movie. The first time was with her years ago, and the first time all of those references went right over my head. That's what the whole show's about. I have no idea that's what this whole show is about that we're recording now, is me not getting the references. So going through the second time and kind of recognizing all of them, she has the decency of looking at them and going, oh, I wonder what this detail is. And just finding those things as she usually does. And I'm just overwhelmed by like, oh, that's like they made the lament configuration into a ball. That's fun. That's neat. So Carly, we usually start these discussions about a film by reading its IMDb synopsis. The kind of our meta game that we play is it a good or bad summary? Does it give away too much about the movie? Does it talk way too less about it? Is it too long, too short? So this one reads, The Cabin in the Woods. A group of kids go to a remote cabin in the woods where their fate is unknowingly controlled by technicians as part of a worldwide conspiracy where all horror movie cliches are revealed to be part of an elaborate sacrifice ritual.
Didn't leave anything to imagination with that.
No, not at all.
I'm going to say that's bad.
Like,
I'm going to say
it's
that's
just
bad.
too much.
Yeah. It's both short and uninspired because it's just, and then this, and then also this, and this is a part of, there's not really like colorful, enticing language. Like if this is the back of the DVD, all right, I'm putting the DVD back on the shelf. You understand? I have no interest in putting this into my cart on Amazon.
Yeah, I don't know. This is such a strange movie because the point of it with the title, with the what should be the synopsis is basically just the synopsis of Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Like, group of friends go to a cabin, bad things happen. Because that's the point. It's almost to trick you into of just like, I'm going to see this generic, like it's literally just called Cabin in the Woods. I don't know what this is about. And then you go in and the opening scene is what it is. And it's like, okay. And then the movie unveils itself as you go along as to what's actually going on. I think that's the genius of the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
The Cabin in the Woods released for the first time at what's called the Butt Numbathon in December of 2011. Now, that is a film festival that's put on by Harry Knowles, I believe is his name. He was the runner of ain'titcoolnews.com.
Well, normally with film festivals, we try to do like, it's our bit that I'm desperately trying to establish where every film festival, we make a funny name. Canis, for example. However, in this example, Butt Numbathon's a perfectly funny. I don't think we need to change that at all.
Yeah, they did it for us.
At all. 100%.
It then had its U.S. theatrical release in April 13th of 2012. It got held back. There's a bunch of that I'll go into shortly here. It's directed by Drew Goddard, and it's written by Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon, who also produced the film. Just a brief, Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon worked together on a bunch of Joss's shows. So Buffy the Vampire Slayer, its spinoff Angel.
With David Boreanaz.
Yes. Drew was also the writer-producer on Alias and Lost. So not only has he worked with Joss Whedon, he's also worked with J.J. Abrams.
Carly. Lost.
Oh, it's great.
Yes, it is.
Big fan.
He's the creator and writer of Netflix's Daredevil for Marvel back in the day.
Oh, my God. So she gets Lost and I get Daredevil.
True.
That's my favorite thing.
He was the director of the pilot episode of The Good Place, which I know is a series that both of you love.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's amazing.
And then he was a writer on Cloverfield, which is something that I absolutely love.
Yep.
He was the writer for World War Z, The Martian, and then he directed a movie called Bad Times at the El Royale.
Now, I don't know what the second movie in that list is.
World War Z?
Yeah, I don't know what that is. What does the Z stand for?
Not zombies.
That's a good cover up.
Yeah.
You did it. You made me feel great. Thanks.
It's actually Zed from Men in Black.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's World War Rip Torn.
That's it.
Yeah.
That was good.
It's a weird spinoff.
That's the dad from Freddy Got Fingered. That's his most famous role.
Yeah. And Patches O'Houlihan from
Dodgeball.
Joss Whedon, I'm sure people already know, but he's the creator, writer, and director of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, Firefly, Dollhouse, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for Marvel.
Every show with a cult following.
Pretty much, honestly, at this point. He was originally, way back in the day, he was the writer for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie. He was a writer on Toy Story. He was a writer on Alien Resurrection with Sigourney Weaver. And he was a director for Serenity, which was the sequel movie to Firefly after it got canceled. Obviously, he did the Avengers and Age of Ultron, and then he had to pick up the slack for Justice League after Zack Snyder stepped away.
Now, what are your thoughts on the Justice League movie?
I don't want to start anything with that, so we're not going to touch it.
Wrong. This is the cold open for Justice League. Thank God I'm kidding. Could you imagine if that was serious? We'd lose every fan we've ever made.
Yes, we would. We've actually mentioned the cinematographer before, Peter Deming, and that's because he was the cinematographer for Scream 2, 3, and 4. He worked with David Lynch on Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive, Drag Me to Hell for Sam Raimi, and Oz the Great and Powerful for Sam Raimi. And then this one is edited by Lisa Lasek, and she is somebody who has edited basically everything that Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon have ever worked on.
So you're saying somebody named LASIK makes something easier on the eyes?
Yeah, absolutely. She's done a good job.
That's a high caliber joke that I just made.
It is.
I want an award.
I'll make you one.
Good, thanks.
Budget for this movie.
Oh, shit. Oh, no. Carly, can you? It's a running thing where I get this wrong every time, but I guess anyway to see how wrong I was.
Okay. Oh, we're guessing what the budget for the film was?
Can you give me a guess and then I'll say it so that if I'm right, it's me, but if I'm wrong, it's you.
Can you tell me, are we allowed to jump forward and see how much it pulled in the box office?
That will be the next stat, but yeah, I can tell you, it made just shy of $70 million.
Okay, so I'm going to guess the budget was probably $20 million. Was that right?
Would you like to give a guess, PJ?
It's $20 million.
It's $30 million.
Okay, all right, close.
But not bad.
Hey.
I'm typically pretty good at the prices, right?
And you
Hey,
see
we
how
were only off by $10 million.
And you see how she asked like a question and then tried to like figure it out instead of just blindly yelling out a number?
That's not the PJ way. The PJ way is to slam my face into it over and over until I get it correct. And I don't have a face anymore.
Tried and true method.
Thank you.
Always. So to go into kind of the rest of the facts and figures here, kind of the production stuff like normal, Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard, they wrote this movie over the course of a long weekend. This is something, I don't know if they just like needed something that they were like, oh, we've got to deliver. We were.
It's like that story about Mary Shelley and a bunch of people in the cabin, and they're like, everyone, spend the night and write your scariest story. And then she wrote Frankenstein, but these guys wrote Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
Did they happen to write it in a cabin in the woods?
I don't believe so. I think it was in a hotel room. They locked themselves in for, yeah. They really could have.
They could have.
This is Drew Goddard's directorial debut. He was very nervous about a lot of the things he had to do. Whedon has described, and we kind of talked about this a bit off the top, is he's described this film as an attempt to revitalize the horror genre.
I think he did that.
It was yeah, absolutely. He called it, quote, a loving hate letter to the genre because
That's just what Scream is. That's what all 6 Screams are a loving hate letter. That's fun.
Right. And you have to think about this movie came out just after like Scream 4. So it's like the Scream franchise, which is that franchise that was kind of making the commentary of horror films had been not around for 10 years. And then Scream 4 happened to happen. This also happened all within a short time. But he treated it like a very serious critique of what they loved and what they couldn't stand about horror movies. And that they wanted it to be a real mixture of both thrill, horror, and to have a, kind of comedic backbone through it. That they didn't want it to devolve into like torture porn, which was also really big at the time. They were like not fans of that, and they were kind of like, let's swing the pendulum back in the other direction.
Are they talking about Saw?
They could be.
Those bastards. How dare they?
Great movies.
Oh,
man.
Carly, what are your thoughts on John Kramer? What do you think about Jigsaw?
I stand by everything he has ever done.
Yeah, but do you think he's sexy? Do you
I
think
sure
Tobin
do.
Bell is sexy?
I have reached out to Tobin Bell.
Why?
Like with your
What?
arms?
I sure have, and with my heart and my butt.
Jigsaw.
That's all you can say, or we get sued.
Oh, thank God. Stop. We need the heart of the ocean to pay that lawsuit.
Or my left sawed off leg.
That's good.
Topical.
It's because we're talking about Saw.
That's exactly right.
And we can talk about legs too if you want.
Sure, yeah.
You're the guest.
Derek, your legs?
I like a good leg.
How are they doing?
They're all right. They're
You got a Charlie horse?
No, not currently.
Good.
Shaved like a swimmer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Always.
Always, yeah.
Swimmed like a shaver?
No.
All right.
So we've also talked about like the sheer amount of like creatures and things that come out toward the end of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
obviously, anyone listening, we're going to be going into spoilers for Cabin in the Woods. So I don't know how much of like the mystery we're going to try and hold back at the beginning and then just reveal it anyway. But we assume you've either watched the movie when you're listening to this or you don't care about spoilers.
What I will say is just as a bit of preface to our conversation about this one, I strongly recommend watching this one first.
Yes.
Of all the movies that we've talked about where it's like, we'll kind of talk about the movie enough that you don't really need to get to the next one. This is a one of one. It is its only iteration. It's worth watching. It's an excellent movie. There's no reason not to. So, I mean, unless your attention span is so poor that if you click away from this, you'll never click back because we need the metric. So you stay here. You stay the fuck here. Don't leave.
I'll just keep this episode playing on repeat.
Oh, thank you.
I'll earn back all of those for you.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. PJ, you're going to be very interested in this because the company and the person who designed the creatures for this film is AFX Studios.
Oh, shit.
Who is run by David Leroy Anderson, which may not be a name that you know.
Okay.
But he is married to Heather Langenkamp.
Oh, my God. Mm-hmm. What the? Why are all of these movies connected in these weird ways?
They always are. The horror genre is very small in
small
its community,
world. Yeah.
And that's what I love about it because they're all just like great people, and they're like, "Oh, you like this? Okay, let's come and let's go make a movie together."
Just in case anybody doesn't get that, Heather Langenkamp is
Nancy
from the Nightmare on Elm Street,
right? And then what's funny is that in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, she plays herself married to a special effects artist.
Hilarious.
That's fantastic.
Not played by her husband, but as
well. Yeah, you ever talk to a special effects artist? It's not like they could be on screen. I don't know any personally, but
well, David Leroy Anderson, he has won 2 Academy Awards. He worked on The Nutty Professor and Men in Black. Both of those Oscars he shares with none other than Rick Baker.
Wow.
Okay, question. The Nutty Professor. That's the only nomination it received was for makeup?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't have those facts.
But we just know that. We know that, right?
I thought that's what you were saying. I was wow, I thought it was impressive. I did not think that it was nomination worthy. Impressive.
Yeah. Just the effects.
It didn't get Film of the Year, but he did get Best Lead Actor.
Oh, well.
Was for The Nutty Professor.
That's nuts.
People come to this show for real conversation about horror movies. But if it's not a horror movie, we don't have to get anything right.
That's true.
Yeah, that's a good point.
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation won 2 Golden Globes. Chevy Chase won them both for lead and supporting.
Incredible.
Yeah, if you don't believe us, go look it up.
All of that's getting cut. Don't worry about it.
It's estimated that close to 1,000 people were turned into one of around 60 different monster types. And what's funny is we were just watching this earlier, and the amount of times that we paused just to try and look at the different monsters that are in this movie.
Oh, my favorite thing.
Carly's favorite thing on earth is pausing to absorb the details through a detail-oriented photosynthesis, because the next thing she does is she begins to play it again. And then when there's a change in what she's watching and there are more details, she pauses it.
You got to pause it again. Yeah. It ruins the movie viewing experience, but you get a lot of information.
Yeah, I can't take notes that fast.
That's right.
You guys are fun to watch films with.
Yeah, we know. As you can imagine, the sets on this, the underground complex, all the elevators, the control room, all that is sets. Even like the forest scene, that is all on indoor sets in Vancouver.
I guessed that during a scene where, and not to jump ahead at all, but there's a scene where in the context of the story, there is a gas being pumped through the floor. And in that moment, it was like, that looks way more, even with like dirt and moss and shit, it's like,
very
that looks too sterile to be real. Yeah.
Well, and like with Evil Dead 2013, they did shoot, I think, some of the like outdoor cabin stuff at a cabin they built even just the facade for, just to get that like actual, we're in the outdoors. But then other than that, pretty much everything was on sets.
What about the gas station? Do you know? Do you have that information?
That was an actual location as well, I believe. Like it,
yeah.
And if not, it was a set built outside, but I believe it was an actual one because whenever they showed up, that was the first day of shooting was at the gas station. And so it's Drew Goddard's first day of directing, and they show up and there's a bunch of snow covering everything. Oh, no. And so they had to like basically just wait it out until it was cleared. And
all they needed was a long extension cord and a single blow dryer. It would have taken a long time, but it would have taken faster. It would have been faster than letting it melt naturally.
Probably.
Definitely.
Something that's cool for this movie is, and you notice them in the elevator scene toward the end, is you see a few of the like zombie kind of bosses or what have you, the characters from Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2. And that's because this movie was initially planned with a tie-in to that video game.
Yeah.
And so there was going to be downloadable content based on stuff from the movie going into that game. And
Which would have been a very early example of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
like early, like 2011, 2012. That's very early.
Yeah. It would have been cool, but I mean, that whole franchise of the video games, Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, is strictly zombies. So I don't know if that means they were going to try and bring other monsters into it.
I was reading about this, and that's exactly what it said, is that there was supposed to be a secondary level, or I'm not a video game player, but there was supposed to be some other thing that you can get in, that you can get in with the game where you are playing the cabin. So it's all of the monsters and all of the spaces within the cabin you would be able to go through.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and what I have read is that, you know, the same way that the characters, again, not to jump too far ahead, but when they're going down into the cellar and there's all of the different artifacts that they start messing with. And then that's kind of how the game would be, is that you would go down, you would choose which artifact, and then that would be the way in.
I mean,
I think that's genius.
That should just be a game.
That should just be.
I agree.
Well, isn't that kind of what is it? Until Dawn?
Until Dawn is more of it's like a narrative, like linear game where you're making choices. And so the game story branches off into different, it's like a choose your own adventure.
Okay.
Love that.
Then you have Dead by Daylight, which is more or less the plot to Cabin in the Woods as a game series, but it's not so nondescript. It's not like there are ancient ones that might wait. It's none of the plot. It's just similar in the sense that it is a universe where these monsters exist, and one by one they are let loose to wreak their havoc
in different scenarios
to like feed the thing that's keeping them all there.
Okay, cool.
So it's similar in that way. And funny enough, in my notes, and we'll get to it eventually. In my notes, I make another comparison to Dead by Daylight.
Okay.
Because Dead by Daylight is also very a cabin in the woods sort of storytelling for a lot of what they've gone over.
Right. The movie was originally slated for a wide release in February of 2010. Before that, it was even supposed to release in October of 2009, but that was delayed until the next year in 2011. They were planning on converting it to 3D. That eventually, that didn't happen. Both Joss and Goddard were like, we don't need that. We don't want that. There's no reason to convert it.
Bummer.
That was also during that period of time where like, not a lot of, everything was being converted to 3D.
Oh, yeah.
Very few things were getting like shot in 3D. Like
2009, that's Coraline right there. They did, specifically, they filmed that entire movie to be in 3D. So
right. That's one of the good examples.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of the best examples.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Then of course you have
I'm biased.
Then of course you have the worst example of something that was shot for 3D, which is of course Friday the 13th 3D, wherein a man's eyeball pops out. But they didn't think to have it go all the way to the camera. So in 3D clarity, it pops out halfway.
That's all you need.
Yikes.
That's all you need.
That's all you need.
It's not getting swallowed.
In the 80s.
It's not getting swallowed by the cameraman and then making a hilarious gulp noise like Evil Dead.
That was good.
That is good.
But the bigger issue here is that in June of 2010, MGM, who was the company who produced this movie, they announced that the film would be delayed indefinitely because of studio bankruptcy. So they were going through some not good financial stuff at the time. And not only this, but their other film, Red Dawn, that they had produced, which strangely enough also stars Chris Hemsworth. Those were the last two pictures that they had produced, and they were trying to reshape the whole company because of that. And so it finally got picked up by Lionsgate, thankfully.
Yeah.
And so they announced that they had the distribution rights, and they then gave the April 13th of 2012 release. Goddard describes working with Lionsgate as an absolute dream for them to pick it up because they didn't make them cut a single thing from the movie. So they got to make exactly what they wanted.
Well, those are those sort of lightning in a bottle movies where it's not rife with issues. It's not a tumultuous, making of the movie. It is easy to make. It was easy and fun to write. And those movies will, sometimes they last forever. It's the first Scream movie. Was a good idea by talented writers who had a unique and shared vision that went on to make something that is probably going to be meta and last forever.
Not betting?
Not for me. Thanks.
Seems a little harsh, doesn't it? It's just people letting off steam. This job isn't easy, however those clowns may behave.
Does the director... Do they know about this downstairs?
The director doesn't care about this stuff. As long as everything goes smoothly upstairs, as long as the kids do as they're told.
But then it's fixed.
No.
How can you wager on this when you control the outcome?
No, we just get them in the cellar. They take it from there.
No, they have to make the choice of their own free will. Otherwise, the system doesn't work. It's like the Harbinger. It's this creepy old fuck. Practically wears a sign, "You will die." Why do we put him there? The system. They have to choose to ignore him, and they have to choose what happens in the cellar. Yeah, we rig the game as much as we need to, but in the end, they don't transgress.
They can't be punished. So what's it gonna be, Truman? You in? Windows closing?
I'm fine.
Okay. That's it, gang. The board is locked. Oh, let's get this party started.
This is exactly the opposite of the beginning of Evil Dead Rise in the sense that with Evil Dead Rise, it's Evil Dead. So you're expecting to be centered around teenagers in a cabin. And you start with teenagers in a cabin and very quickly leave that and go, wait, no, what? This movie is cabin in the woods. All of the marketing is a fucking cabin in the fucking woods. And then it opens in that underground facility from the clip that we just played. It is completely the opposite of what you'd expect. It is sterile. It is professional. There's a fucking sign in our A story behind our two leads that says administration. It is, you are expecting this cabin and you are cabinless, which is, I think, the best way to have immediately shaken up what you could expect this movie to be about.
Well, and that was absolutely done on purpose. That is something that they had to fight for, they being Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon. I don't think that MGM, who was producing the film at the time, understood exactly what they were trying to do because they kind of fought them at different times. They wanted them to cut a lot of the stuff showing like the company doing what they're doing. And it's like, that's the whole point.
Oh, it's
like
so
we've
important.
got to see that.
Yeah.
But they wanted to kind of trick people of like, people have come in, they've seen all the marketing, they come in, they sit down at their seats, and then we play, and it's like, did we come into the wrong theater? What is happening?
That's exactly what happened with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I left the theater. I was seeing Looper. I think that came out the same year. If I'm wrong, that's just
Roughly,
hilarious.
it's
But
pretty
leave it
close.
in. Even if I'm wrong, leave it in. I want people to know that I can make mistakes, and I usually do. I like how the conversation that they're having in the very beginning is not specific about whatever the plot of the movie's about.
No.
They're just saying it sounds like business, like transactions. They talk about like, oh, well, that fell through in Sweden. And like, well, I guess we just got to wait for it's just us in Japan. And it feels very like stock trading almost, like something that is regional and very, volatile, which we find out that it is.
Yeah, because they're basically like, they're just having a conversation like between colleagues.
Who have clearly known each other a long time.
Right. And yeah, they do mention that like it's just them and Japan left. We have no understanding of what that is. They mention the last time that they weren't able to complete the ritual was in 1998. And that was due to a screw up in the chem department. And it's like, well, none of this means anything to any of us at this point.
Ritual is the word that gets a notice because up until that point, chem department, whatever, they're wearing basically like lab technician clothing. It's nondescript as to what they're doing. So saying chem department doesn't throw me off, but then saying the ritual is strange. It's those kinds of words that throw you off.
And the example of 1998, I believe, is a reference to the Robert Rodriguez film, The Faculty. Josh Hartnett was in that. Elijah Woods was in that. I've seen it a long time ago, but I can't remember a whole lot about it.
Elijah Wood is the king of large-eyed men.
That he is.
Thaddeus.
That's the second time that joke has been made in this podcast.
Who made it first?
You.
Yeah, it's nice.
Great minds.
She learned it from watching you. That's a joke later. Then one of my favorite things, because I mentioned this in our Evil Dead chat, but the fact that these movies came out within like the same like 2 years is wild. That the things that Cabin in the Woods is kind of parodying most is Evil Dead, but that new version hadn't come out. But then they both do like smash cuts to the credit or to the title sequence, and
Which I love.
Oh,
It was so well placed.
yes, the timing of it is beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we cut to just like suburbia, like
And what's funny, that reminds me so much of Scream, going
Yeah.
from something really heavy and, or even just confusing, going from something that is thematically so opposed to title, then to like pop music for the time. And you're cutting to some girl's apartment and she's just like, oh, I'm living my life. And it's completely tonally different. That's a very, cutting from Casey's death to all the rest of them at the school the next day. And there's like pop music playing and everyone's having a good time. It reminded me a lot of Scream.
yeah, no, that's a good pull. This is where we get introduced to basically our cast of characters here. We have Dana, who is played by Kristen Connolly. She was in The Happening, the M. Night Shyamalan film. She was in The Bay, A Good Marriage, and Deep Water in 2022. Those are kind of the like genre-y things that I found that she's been in. Okay. Chris Hemsworth plays Kurt. This is Chris Hemsworth. Maybe have you heard of him?
This is Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Another Chris, Lord, with all of those Star Trek movies with Chris Pine,
He was in that. He was in Star Trek 09.
was he?
Yeah, he plays Kirk's father at the very beginning of that film.
Fuck you, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I thought I was being funny, but you're right, he is in that fucking movie.
It's wild, isn't it? So he's in this movie, but because it got shelved and pushed back, after his performance in this, he then gets Red Dawn, which also got shelved for a while, moved to a different production company, but that also got him Thor in the MCU. Then he does the Avengers. We know who Chris Hemsworth is. He's
But didn't you say that because of that, this movie came out after Thor?
Yes.
That's
so this
crazy.
movie drops after Thor.
Wow.
It comes out in the same year as the Avengers.
I bet that helped.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. But that's the other thing is like that means that Joss Whedon had two movies that came out in 2012, one that he was directing and one that he wrote and produced.
Big
That's
year.
pretty cool.
So yeah, it's just weird how it played out that way. Jules is played by Anna Hutchinson. She was in Wendy Wu, Homecoming Warrior.
Wow.
She was also in Power Rangers Jungle Fury. She was in Spartacus War of the Damned, which was a sequel series to the Spartacus series that we mentioned last week with like the editors and cinematographers of Evil Dead Rise.
Yeah, what I'm finding is that horror as a genre is very like that whatever 5 degrees of bacon. Or
Yeah.
whatever that
6
number-
degrees of
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon,
Separation,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, everything's connected somehow. Heather Langenkamp is in it from earlier. It's all connected.
Heather Langenkamp, because she works with her husband, actually worked on the effects of this film. Holden is played by Jesse Williams. He was in Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants 2.
Weird.
I'm just trying to think of things that people might know him from that are our age. He was in the remake of Jacob's Ladder, and he was in a movie that you and I watched, PJ, last October called Random Acts of Violence from 2018.
Which was great
Yeah,
at the
fantastic.
time, and I have found did not stick with me
Yeah,
at all.
not sticky at all.
No, I've forgotten almost everything. I remember him being in it, and I remember liking that movie, but I don't remember almost anything about that movie.
Yeah, it's got some cool visuals, but
It's the Justin Long effect.
and then the fifth of our group here, Marty, rolls up in like a red station wagon looking car, which apparently was Drew Goddard's from high school, much like Sam Raimi's car
Yeah.
in Evil Dead.
With Marty, I have a note with Marty, and my note is, quote, Marty is just Randy, a 1-1 ratio. They are exactly the same character. They serve exactly the same purpose. They are written just as funny. Their performances are very similar with similar looking guys.
Yeah.
So we finally got Randy back, kind of.
He's also, I mean, very much of he's Shaggy from Scooby Doo.
Yes. No dog, but all of the weed. Yeah, I don't know what word to use.
Marty is played by Fran Kranz. He was in Donnie Darko. He was in M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. He was in an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Would you like to take a guess on which?
Hold on. Full transparency to the listeners at home. I really wanted to guess this, but I didn't want to take forever in the recording. So I paused the recording so that I could think about it. And I didn't get it. Derek had to give it away. But it is would you like to?
No, you can.
He's the lab tech who has to test Charlie and Frank's poopy in Who Pooped the Bed.
Yeah.
I said all of that with zero shame. I said all of those words together. I'm not embarrassed at all.
It's the poopy. That's all.
Well, we're trying to keep this. I don't want to say like shit right off the bat.
You guys have already cursed. I don't know if you realize that. I put a little,
We don't
so that I can remember.
We do not fucking curse.
No, not at all.
Knock that off. We
You
don't
guys are
fucking
so
curse,
cool.
bro. We are good lads.
He worked with Joss Whedon again on Dollhouse, Much Ado About Nothing, which is another Joss Whedon film. And then he was in The Dark Tower, which is a movie you and I watched in 2017 together.
We did watch
I don't
that.
remember who he was because I don't remember a thing about that movie.
He was Matthew McConaughey's body because Matt couldn't be bothered to fucking show up.
That is hilarious because of a fact later on. Okay,
Okay.
so that's our main cast, everyone. We can go on.
We did it.
They are getting ready to go on vacation to a cabin in the woods, which apparently belongs to Kurt's cousin.
Yes.
That's all we get. And
We are met with Marty's collapsible bong as he drives up in this old car with a thing that they're like, you can't bring that with us. And he's like, no, watch. And he collapses it into like a coffee mug, like an old dad's going to office, keeping his coffee hot from home coffee mug, which is amazing.
I've never been more impressed.
fully functional prop. It was a prototype. It cost $5,000 to
You're
make.
kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Worked.
I wonder where that is
apparently.
now.
Yeah.
We got to get one for Dylan
Yeah.
because of the doobies.
Bring it all full circle.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's introduced. We get kind of a feeling of who our cast of characters are here and like who they really are.
Well, what's funny about that is that I think it's kind of you don't really mean to, but you immediately start to assign roles to them as to, and then you realize later on that you're doing that and you probably shouldn't do that as often. But yeah, immediately you start to try to define their roles. But like,
Which is a classic horror trope, I think. You know,
Yeah,
they
oh,
tend
yeah.
to follow the same roles that were kind of spelled out for the film. So I think you naturally just kind of slide into that. And it's just like, oh, okay, so she'll be the quiet, you know, kind of tamed schoolgirl. This one's going to be more the wild child. This guy, you know, he's big. He looks like a linebacker. So
and I like that they immediately throw you off because the big linebacker guy's like, no, don't read that. Read this. This is the better. And it's like, oh no, so he's not the big dumb guy. Is there a big dumb guy? Which they immediately establish no, which is odd.
Yeah. But they're playing with that that trope.
Right.
And we get our first, as they drive away, we get our, you know, we pan up to the guy on the roof with an earpiece in, and he says, "Nest is empty."
Yeah, they're on the way.
They're on, you know, we're right on schedule.
Which then, as the camera cuts back, it's like, oh, okay, no, so these are fucking connected.
Yeah.
I like a
But we
movie
still
like this.
don't know exactly how or what is going on.
Well, and I like a movie like this where it asks questions, and as it asks those questions, it answers two previous. And so every two new questions, you get an answer to two, but from long ago. So it's, are these things connected? Why did I just watch this? Does this have any bearing? It does, but why and how? I like stuff like that.
Oh yeah. No, I would agree. I think this is almost a perfectly written film. The way that it's structured, you have a definite 3-act structure. Almost every 30 minutes, it's like, okay, and now this is happening and we are in act 2.
Yeah.
Oh, and now they found this and we're in act 3, everyone. And then also every setup has a payoff, and it also allows you to, like, they give you what's happening as you go along. As the characters are piecing it together, you get to piece it together.
Which is nice.
But it also allows you to go back and rewatch with those eyes again.
Oh yeah, they trim a lot of the fat too. You know, whatever is there is necessary. There's not really a whole lot that's just kind of left for, you know, vamping or needing to fatten it up at all. Like it's concise.
Kind of hitting on that concise nature of it too. We talked about this with Evil Dead, the 2013 version. Every little detail has a fucking payoff to some degree. Everything has a payoff, and we've already started that. There's already been mentions to at least 2 things that are relevant and will last throughout the movie. And then before we fully leave the scene, I want to give what my favorite joke is in the entire movie. And I notated this early on. I was like, I'm going to keep this on my notes until something funnier happens. And nothing funnier happened than Marty making sure his car door was locked in spite of the window being completely open.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so funny. It's so good. And it's
everything that Marty does.
His acting of it, of like, it's like he's wiping his forehead like, oh, thank God. And it's just, that's so stupid.
It's a good thing I didn't forget that. No, I agree. That joke, everything that Marty says in this movie, I find funny.
Oh, it's great.
Marty is like, not only, because he's like the stoner is where the fool is where he gets put, but he is like the actual brains and like back.
He's the catharsis. Yeah. It's
of the whole movie.
Well, it's because the weed, and we'll go into this later, but the weed serves his mind sort of like these violent delights have violent ends in Westworld, and it like wakes up the hosts into consciousness. Marty just smoked so much that he was able to see the Matrix through the trees, which is
great because that's typically kind of a stoner trope. Is conspiracy is you smoke so much that it's like, oh my gosh, paranoia. That's the big thing that you always hear. It's like, oh well, I smoke, I get paranoid. So it kind of builds on that stereotype a little bit of like, oh well, you're kind of meant to almost dismiss it. It's like, well, that's just what happens when people get high, right? They get paranoid. So you don't even consider that this is going to pay off later in a really big way.
Which is why it reminds me so much of fucking Randy from Scream. Because Randy from Scream sits there and shouts at these people, this is what is going to happen to you. You are going to die and you're going to do it in these ways. And they're like, that fucking nut job, Randy.
He watches too many movies.
So then he's dead and he leaves them a video of like, if you're watching this, I'm dead. And these things are going to happen to you. And still no one listens. So we cut to this movie and Marty's like, guys, there's voices. Why is there a mirror in here? What's going on? And once again, he's the only one asking anything that matters.
So they're in like Kurt's, what do they call it? The Wrangler, it's their RV. I don't know what it calls. But that's where like Marty is sitting there making his joints for the weekend, I guess. And he gives this amazing line of he goes on this whole diatribe about seeing the strings and that we're going to be off the grid. I can't wait to be away from people and society and everything else. And he says society needs to crumble.
Yeah, he mentions
is an amazing payoff later.
Good. He mentions that like big tech and GPS and Big Brother and all of those things are filling the cracks in society with concrete, but it needs those cracks to breathe. And it's like, what a weirdly still relevant piece of meta dialogue.
Yeah. Then they reach the gas station.
Yeah.
Which is where they meet. It's like we've seen. It's another trope like we've seen tons of times in these sorts of films. Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, things like that, where they show up to what appears to be an abandoned gas station, an old service station, and there is a harbinger, if you will, someone who is there to basically go, do not continue on this path.
The note that I have, it's funny that you mentioned those two films. The note that I have is the gas station is a mix to me of the Sawyer family barbecue shack and the little town outside of the Camp Crystal Lake where the old man is like, there's a death curse. And it reminded me of both of those things. So it's funny that we went to the same place. And they call this one, his name is Mordecai. And they call him
the Harbinger.
Morty.
Yeah. He comes out and says some scary things, basically tries to scare them off of his property. He calls Jules a whore at this point. I'm only pointing that out because at different points throughout the film, each of the members basically get referenced as their archetype. That's where they also, because they're asking where this cabin is, where they're on Tillerman Road, I believe is what he says. And it's like the old Buckner place is what they're looking for.
That's right. Yeah. And I had looked it up because that popped immediately into my brain as something that was familiar because last year I'd actually gone to New Orleans with my dad. So, and he is a very big fan of the American Horror Story series. Loves it. So, I had asked because, I wanted to hit all of the main spots, the Lalaurie Mansion that's down there off of Bourbon. So then we went to go see the gravesite of Marie Laveau and we dropped some coins at her gravesite because it's supposed to be good luck. So we did that. And we went to go see the Buckner Mansion, which is where American Horror Story Coven was filmed.
Okay.
So,
Which is my favorite season. I did not know that.
it's incredible. Yeah. And it's beautiful. Like actually going to the place is incredible. And there are a tremendous amount of paranormal stories that
In
are
and around that
surrounded.
area.
Yeah.
Does it have
yeah.
anything to do with the Axemen stuff that's in that season?
No. It
That's
says
just kinda
that a former caretaker of the house is still there. She's kind of this big, character. Her name is Miss Josephine. But yeah, ghosts are a big part of that. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
I've never gone on like a ghost tour or anything like that, surprisingly.
Yeah. We went down to Key West a few weeks ago, and we did a ghost tour down there. That was pretty cool. And I personally don't believe in ghosts. It's still fun. It's
Yeah, to hear the legends
Yeah.
and, people's accounts.
Oh, yeah. Especially because you don't think a lot of them are going to be based off of true stories, but several of them are, whereas you can actually go back and you can fact check and be like, hey, is this a real thing? Not necessarily the ghost stories, but what they're inspired from. 100% real.
Not to go too far away from the Harbinger in the gas station, but you told me a story as well, which fits this podcast super well, about the blue on the inside of people's front door
it's
alcoves.
fascinating. Yeah. So when you go to Key West, because there were several horrible hurricanes that came through that would just destroy the Keys. It was awful. And then there was actually a fire that broke out in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. Doesn't matter. But it destroyed like 70% of the island. It was awful. But because there's this phrase in Key West, and it's called "What dies in the Keys stays in the Keys."
Okay.
And, there's a tremendous amount of shipwrecks that are down there, and, people that have passed coming in and, hitting the coral reefs. That's a big thing that happens. There's a storm, they smash against coral reefs, boom, that's it. And there's this amazing phenomenon that they have down there where all of the houses, if you go and you can look under, what is it called?
Like an alcove, like a front door
it's like
alcove.
right, like on the outside of the house, like where your front door is. There's that space where it's like kind of like a little roof. On that space is this like crystal blue color, and it's on every single one of the houses. And it's supposed to be for the ghosts that are wandering on the island. They're not meant to come in and haunt your house because it reminds them of the ocean, so they go away.
Wow.
So now they're just kind of in the streets or in the several cemeteries that happen to be on the island. But yeah, if you ever go to the Keys, check it out because it is a beautiful blue. It's meant to scare away all the ghosts.
It's a bold tourism strategy, by the way, that phrase. Because you have what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's everything.
Oh,
That's
so
everything
grim.
that's happening.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that's staying in Key West is your dead, stupid fucking body. If you die there, you're there forever.
It's a pretty good place to spend all of eternity, I think. It's paradise.
Well, unless you don't like the water, then there's nothing to do down there.
Well, why were you in the Keys to begin with?
I died in a shipwreck in the late 1800s.
You've got to love the water if you're on a ship.
It was just a job.
Far from the ocean, we are on a mountain pass.
Yes.
Where there's a tunnel.
All these movies with the fucking tunnels.
Yeah, well, this is where we get, because they don't have like an Evil Dead, they have the bridge, which eventually, gets destroyed. But this doesn't have that. It has the mountain pass tunnel. And then this is where we get our first
Pin in the bridge, by the way.
weird technology thing that's happening, because you see this hawk fly over the gorge and smash into an invisible wall.
like a Tron light cycle beam.
Yeah.
But
Weird
it's
that
like
they would have them be like hex patterns. I think that kind of just adds to this is very clean technology aspect of this.
Yeah.
But it's stark. They could have used any other pattern, but having specifically the hexes go all the way down.
It reminds me of the modern retelling of The Invisible Man. His suit has that pattern all over it.
Yeah, whenever I can look at it and not be trypophobed out. Yeah.
Also,
That movie gets you?
A little bit at times.
Man, that's really bad for
It's
you,
something
isn't it?
about the way that they kind of blink on his body whenever it's freaking out and stuff.
Okay,
fair.
fair enough.
the image that you see closer to the end of the film on the ground, well, actually you see it several times around the necks of the two main guys that work down below. It's the exact same shape as that's on the grid.
I hadn't noticed that. I hadn't put it together. Yeah.
There you go.
I like that.
That's what I bring to the table here.
Thank you.
Now, do you do that for a hobby?
I do actually.
We'll leave it. We'll leave it there.
Well-paid hobby.
A well-paid hobby.
Find me on TikTok.
Oh,
That's good. We will definitely plug whatever you want to plug at the end of this, because, you're like we are most places with this podcast. You are posting most places as well. So people should be able to find you. We make it to our cabin, and it looks very, very much like the cabin from Evil Dead. It looks very
does.
much like the cabin from Cabin in the Woods as well.
identical.
As Dana goes in for the first time, we get kind of like from the Evil Dead,
Yes.
that shot of Scotty walks in for the first time and it follows him around the room, just kind of get a layout of
It's
what
a
we're,
brilliant thing to
seeing
do
here.
to have a small space like that and a character goes in and takes inventory of the space.
Well, and this seems like a much more furnished and lived in sort of cabin.
Yes, I can believe someone lives here.
Or at least rents it out.
Sure,
As vacation home.
Well, and it's interesting too that, as you're doing that kind of introductory walkthrough of the cabin, a lot of the shots that you're getting seem to be like the shots that the folks down below would be looking through, where it's, there's a camera probably planted here and that's your perspective. You're looking through what it is that they would be seeing in the house. And I'm not even talking about the transitions where it would actively move from the cabin to, whatever it is, what are we calling
facility.
this? Sure. Yeah. Where it's not even something like that. It's several scenes where, they're looking in the mirror, or it's a perspective that's almost kind of like a bird's eye that's checking them out from the corner of the room, where we ended up finding out one of the cameras were placed. It's
shooting in a realistic way where it's because you get to feel both like them as they discover things.
And an intruder.
Right.
You feel like you're not really supposed to be looking in on these moments in the perspective that you're in.
Which is voyeuristic in that way.
right.
Which is why later on in the movie, not to cut too far ahead, I think we were all just very excited because we just watched this.
Love this movie. It's so good.
But it's Randy calling out to puppeteers. His eyes travel just around the camera. And it's like, he's talking about us.
Yeah.
We get to fit into that mold as well here, which is neat.
He does. His name's Marty, though.
Did I say Randy?
You said Randy. And that's hilarious.
And the woman from The Evil Dead.
No, wait.
Okay, well, wait. I'm not going to look it up.
Don't look it up.
I'm going to get it right.
You think about it.
Oh, God.
As they kind of spread out across the rooms, that's when we get the horrific painting in Holden's bedroom.
I wanted to stop and look at it so bad.
Yeah,
Straight out of the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
Straight, like it's more colorful. So in my notes, I have this reminds me of the Necronomicon. And then for people who like the show, Parks and Recreation, it also reminds me of one of the horrific murals in the Pawnee.
100%. Yes.
Like that would be there. It's that one. And then the next one is like an old white senator like setting a woman on fire. Like that's what would be in Pawnee.
Did you write any notes about that painting?
It's not explained explicitly, but what we kind of see is either villagers. I don't know if they're the Buckner family or because the Buckners, that diary that she reads later, I'm jumping ahead, it was from 1904.
Yeah.
And so obviously the Harbinger explains that this property has been turned over the years. So I don't know who is supposed to be in that, but it's a bunch of villagers like slaughtering a goat.
Yeah, I saw that, and it was like a pure white goat,
But also
which
looks-
kind of symbols purity and innocence and all of that, which is pretty interesting. But if you look in the back of this, it looks like a man in a suit,
Like
standing
and like with like a pilgrim hat.
Yeah, like
he looks almost like he's holding, a knife or
something. Yeah, he's wielding something, but definitely stood out. Against all of the other images that were shown in that portrait. I didn't want to be that guy and just keep pausing during this movie, but that's all I wanted to do. I was just like, oh my God, please let me look at every single aspect of this so that I can see if I can remember any of the monsters that we end up seeing later in this portrait. Like, is this supposed to be a bit of foreshadowing? Is this something that, they're going to see? And obviously it's supposed to turn them off and have them take the thing off the wall so that it would reveal the two-way mirror. But, having a little bit of that, hey, this is kind of what you're in for a little bit. I felt like I don't know.
That is when you get the shot Carly described where the camera pulls back and we go through a monitor to the control room. Where, let me point out, because I don't think we've mentioned who their names are, but the two guys who work in this facility who are, our other main characters, if you will, are Gary Sitterson, who is Richard Jenkins. He was in The Witches of Eastwick, which is directed by, it's from 1987, and it's directed by George Miller. He was in 1994 Wolf, which is a werewolf movie starring Jack Nicholson. He is the father in the American remake of Let the Right One In, which was called Let Me In. He is in Jack Reacher in 2012, and he was in Bone Tomahawk, Kong Skull Island, The Shape of Water, and Nightmare Alley.
Oh, wow.
More recently. Again, he's been in a ton of things. You've seen him. He's worked with the Coen brothers a bunch. I'm just trying to point out things of that were like horror or sci-fi related.
He is like Dad you recognize from that one thing. That is what he is. Actor man who plays Dad in Thing from ago.
Yes. And then the other guy is Steve Hadley. He's played by Bradley Whitforth. He was in RoboCop 3. I know him originally from Billy Madison. He plays like the villain in that.
Okay.
Yeah, he does.
And
That's right.
that's where I always go back to. Strangely, he was in The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants,
But
not the second one.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
His biggest starring role is he's in The West Wing, that TV show that ran forever. He was in Get Out. So he is the girlfriend.
Oh my God, he's older and he wears glasses. That's where I know him from.
Yes.
Okay. Because it's been bothering me because it's like, no, I recognize like his facial performance. I recognize a lot. Yeah. And then I didn't want to IMDb it because we're going to have this conversation. But I was like, I'm racking my brain because he is like white haired. And okay, that's great.
He's great in that. And then he was in Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Is he really? Oh my God, you're fucking right.
Yep. He works for Monarch.
That's really good. That's a good fact.
The other people who are in there, Daniel Truman, who is like their security guard.
Right.
He's played by Brian White. He hasn't done a ton of genre stuff. He does a lot of like sports movies. So he was in Mr. 3000, which was like a Bernie Mac sports movie. He was in Brick, which is a Joseph Gordon-Levitt starring neo-noir film that Rian Johnson directed.
Okay.
He's in Stomp the Yard. He's in The Name of the King, the Dungeon Siege tale,
No idea.
based on a video game. It's the only thing I could really find there.
idea.
And then he was in the TV show Scandal. Wendy Lynn is played by Amy Acker. She is the other woman who works for the company. She was in Angel. She was in Alias, which are both, I think both of those are done by J.J. Abrams, if I'm not mistaken. And then, or no, Angel is Joss Whedon, Alias is J.J., Dollhouse, Person of Interest, which is J.J. Abrams, and then she's worked with all of them. So we're back now in the control room, I guess is what we'll call it. And they are kind of explaining, this is where we get the Harbinger phone call.
Where he calls in.
To
Very funny.
explain to them that the job is going well.
It's such a this movie scene where this movie does really well to encapsulate the tone of it because he is the creepy old man from the gas station with the redded out bloody eye who chews disgusting tobacco and is just like a gross out guy who tells a horrific doom. Then he calls on a landline. Like something about that immediately detaches you from the mysticism of him. And then
He has to use like a payphone. I
right.
think. Like,
And he's just like, let the ancient ones slumber be forever peaceful. Let it.
this is our first mention of the Ancient Ones here.
Yeah,
Am I on
okay.
speakerphone? And he's just immediately like, it's like a clip. It's like a bit from The Office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is to modernize so much. Oh my God. I think that's how I would describe this movie is what if The Office did the Evil Dead?
Yeah, that's perfect.
They don't have Stanley.
No.
That's disappointing.
Yeah. There's the intern. Never mind.
Nobody looks into camera and does a smug little like, that's a missed opportunity. They should have made all of the underground stuff should have been a handheld camera shot mockumentary like The Office. That would have been great.
Yeah, we'll get them to do that for the
That's
for
Cabin
the
in the
sequel.
Woods too.
Yeah. That's funny. Drew Goddard was asked after this movie by a bunch of people like, oh, well, do you have any plans for Cabin in the Woods 2? He's like, did you watch the ending? What are you talking about?
Right.
Which we will get to. We on this show use the term feel bad ending. We've used it a few times. And if ever there were an example of that,
Oh man.
but we'll get there.
The other thing that Mordecai, the Harbinger, explains is that, things are going to plan, but not exactly by your numbers. And so it's the first kind of, mention that maybe things aren't going to go the way that the plan is supposed to. As they're talking about, they start taking bets on something. We don't even know at this point.
My favorite scene of them in the underground. There's like my favorite scene is a positive and my favorite scene of like something cynical and something dark. My favorite positive scene of the people that work the underground is like the Wolf of Wall Street bullpen where everyone's barking their bets in the air, like waving, like they're like waving them like fans, like, hey, over here. And we don't know what they're betting on.
No.
And then
I love that though.
Yeah,
I
it's
love that.
brilliant.
I think that's great because it almost pulls you out for a second. You're like, wait a second, hold on. Because now you've got a lot more people on the floor than we're used to seeing. and then there's the whiteboard. And so you
It's like,
you
did
get
we miss something? What's
right,
happened?
exactly. But then if you pause even just for a second and you start reading through them, it's like, wait a second, hold on. There's a lot here that I know about. There's
Yeah.
a lot of references that I'm very familiar with. And it immediately almost kind of blows the top off of, and you're just like, okay, all right, I think I know where we're going with this. I'll see if I'm right, but I do have a pretty good idea of where this is now.
This is also where we get our first mention of the director. This is actually the clip that we played earlier. So this is where they explain that they still have free will, they being, you know, the kids in the cabin, and that all they have to do is get them into the cellar.
It's so fucked because it is passing the buck in such a way that it's like, that should be, it's almost criminal. It's like, well, no, they can do whatever they want. They can ignore this harbinger. They pick their thing in the cellar. We just need to get, and it's like, you're letting them pick to do these things, but you've done this. I mean, according to just their dialogue, forever. There's always been something like this. So it's like, but you know they're not going to. So no, you're doing it. You're pumping pheromones into the cabins to get their brains to null so that you can have them murdered by, you know, what we'll get into right now, actually, as they make their way into
Yeah.
the second act.
Yeah, a quick reference, because of something you said before of Fran Kranz, Marty being the body of,
Yes.
is that in the lake scene, they all go out because they're, you know, young kids having fun at a cabin for the weekend or whatever, and they go out to swim in the lake, and they all strip down except for Marty. He stays on the dock for some reason. The reason is because apparently Fran Kranz is just as ripped as Chris Hemsworth, if not more. And so they were like, well, that doesn't fit your character, so got to keep that covered.
That's pretty good.
That's so funny. They should have put him in a t-shirt of a ripped body.
Yeah. It would have been hilarious. Or like a sexy lady body in a bikini that he got down at Key West. When they make it back into the cabin itself, they're hanging out, they're chatting, and that's when, just like in The Evil Dead, Sam Raimi's original, cellar door just bursts open on its own.
Oh, so
Here we
good.
go. Here we go.
So good.
So Carly, in Evil Dead 2, it is revealed that in the fruit cellar of the cabin that Evil Dead takes place in, Evil Dead 2, there's an old woman who's buried down there.
Yeah.
I have referenced her by name in every Evil Dead discussion we've done, and I've gotten her name wrong every time.
Really?
Because it's one of the two. It's either Harriet or it's Henrietta. It's one of those two.
And it doesn't even start with an H.
No, it does. It's one of those
okay.
two. And I always feel like Henrietta is too long. So I always say Harriet. But this time, I'm going to say Henrietta.
He got it right, folks.
Oh, my God.
Look at that.
It only took us talking about a different movie entirely.
Good work.
I don't come to your house and go on your podcast and tell you how to make references.
That's true. They go down into the cellar, which is filled with stuff.
And much like the Evil Dead, when the cellar bursts open, don't go down there. The cellar door slamming open. There's something that we've kind of, I've kind of taken upon myself to live by, like a mantra in this show specifically, since we've been recording these episodes. And it's, I always give like snide remarks about what the characters are doing. Like, don't go down there. What I'm having to remember is that the movie has to happen.
You got to have progress.
Right.
Yeah.
They have to go down there. Because if they just stay in the cabin, you know, I don't know. I guess the SWAT team would come them up or something. I don't know what happens in that scenario.
I don't know what happens in this scenario. Something. But they give them the choice to go down in the cellar. In this case, Dana gets dared to go down there.
Yes.
And they find a bunch of stuff. And what's interesting is on like the rewatch. Well, she kind of reveals like later, you know, that any of the things that they saw down there could have affected things differently. But on the rewatch, then realizing just how close we were to other things.
And kind of what those things are. The ballerina box is obviously the lamprey kid.
That was the thing that I think I was most confused about, is because I think that, along with the necklace that Jules picks up, like those are the first things that really start getting kind of messed with. And he opens the box. It's playing the music. What is it that made it so that wasn't the first monster? Right?
I don't know because each of them play with something. Dana almost immediately gravitates toward this diary. Jules is standing there with a wedding dress, takes the necklace off. She's about to put it on.
Kurt picks up a conch shell.
And he's so close to blowing on that conch shell.
Which again, in a movie where I applaud it for everything having payoff, that one pays off in the funniest way. And of course, we'll get to that. I think that's my favorite scene in it. I think
it's mine.
I think for most people, that's their favorite scene in this movie because it's so fucking, it's funny and it's really deserved. We deserve to be able to get this kill.
And then he switches that up for the puzzle sphere.
Yes.
Which is very much a
lament
configuration from Hellraiser. Yeah. Holden he opens up a music box with a little ballerina in it. And Marty he's the last one to enter the cellar.
He's definitely the last one to interact with anything.
Yeah. And he finally goes over to a bunch of film reels that are hanging up and he starts looking at the film itself.
Well, I'm curious what that was supposed to be.
That's the one that I'm like probably the most interested in. On the board, there is The Bride listed.
I saw that.
So that's, I assume the necklace.
Very Haunted Mansion to me.
Yeah. I don't know if we really see her at any point. I'm sure it's so hard to pinpoint every single thing referenced on that board.
Yeah.
Because it's so blink and you miss it.
You see a lot, though. You see a lot.
Before we finish that sequence and we still have that whiteboard fresh in our mind, you and I have kind of kept track of how many times the word deadite is used recently with Evil Dead. And we have it plain as fucking day written on the whiteboard, deadite. So it's like, oh no, so the Evil Dead is just Cabin in the Woods.
Well, you literally have written out specifically molesting tree.
Yes.
That you end up seeing later in the film.
Yeah, I think they had it named something else before for the first time, and they were like, maybe that's a little too much. Let's just, molesting is fine.
Molesting's fine. I tell you what,
it's harsh enough.
Yeah.
Well, the molesting tree in this film is at least decent enough to be like, oh no, you guys are watching the movie. I'll take myself out of the screen, the shot, because we have to keep doing trigger warnings for all the Evil Dead movies that we watch because it's just so fucking horrific.
Yeah.
So at least this time it was like, the elevator's fine.
Thankfully. Because it becomes a lot, but I love the reference because obviously that's the big thing that we're doing here. But yeah, I don't understand why the music box didn't trigger it at the very least. Maybe the song had to play all the way out.
Or maybe something like you have to look in the mirror and like the kid changes into the lamprey mouth ballerina as you look in the mirror. I mean, it's of anything. That's the best part about this movie is because you're making so many of these monsters up, you can just make up their rules. We don't need to know them because then we end up getting a monster whose rules are kind of laid out for us, and we can. It's the least important part, but the most interesting. Yeah, because it's how many references to their own creations are around us. It's like the second most Easter egg filled moment the cellar.
Well, and back to the ballerina box thing a little bit. It's, if I'm remembering it correctly, the music that's playing in that scene, which seems to drag out forever because it's supposed to stress you out. Like you don't exactly know what's going to happen. You don't really know what it's going to be, a reference to all of these different artifacts that they're picking up. But the only music that's playing during that scene is the music from the box. So as you're sitting there and you're like, okay, all right, something's going to happen. Who's going to do it first? That's the song that's playing. So you're like, okay, what if this song runs up? Because it has been going for a bit now. And I mean, music boxes don't play music that long. So it was right there. So either he slammed the box closed, maybe it's continuity error.
What's funny is that thinking about that kind of abstractly, having that music box tinkery sort of, that's very dun 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 dun, which you are waiting suspensefully to finish. So whereas the jack would normally pop out of the box, this is slamming it shut. It gives you that same sort of scare, that sort of tension being broken in a way that you don't expect. That's a good pull.
Yeah. But Dana reading the diary is what eventually gets them to all stop what they're doing. And kind of pulls them out of their trance that they were kind of all in. She reads through the diary of Anna Patience Buckner, and it was written on April 4th. The entry that she reads is from April 4th of 1903. And, it's not the Book of the Dead. It's not the Necronomicon, but it still kind of fills that spot of like, she's reading through this awful, colonial or
turn of the century.
Thank you. And it's this family that it almost makes me think of like The Witch.
Yeah.
Where it's like they've had to go off and live by themselves because of, whatever the village is like, no, we do not want you here.
It's the terror of old homesteaders, of what would happen to these people who lived 10 miles away from a neighbor. And it's, there's no power, there's no phone lines, there's no grid at all. So what did they do? What happened to them? I think that's its own kind of horror. So to touch on that here is also smart because you need something easy. You need something that's easy to explain, that you don't need to spend a lot of time with the backstory on. So they're like, I don't fucking hillbillies that are zombies now. Great.
Yeah. Well, and apparently, what it is that they did to be able to pass the time was hack each other apart, because then you get introduced to the Black Room for the very first time.
Yeah. Mention of the Black Room. Basically, it's the Buckners. If you're wondering what they did, they worship pain is what they did.
Sure did.
Of course, we get some Latin in there, which Marty does not want them to read in a hilarious turn there. I'm not going to try and read the Latin, but I will give you
the Latin.
I will give you what the translation of it is, which is pain outlives the flesh, pain raises the flesh, pain ignites the spirit.
Pain, really quickly, pain doesn't outlast the flesh. If you didn't have any skin, your skin can't hurt. That's just science.
I'm not sure that's how that works.
Think about it. You have skin. I pinch you. Ow, right? You don't have any skin. What am I pinching? There's no pain there.
I'm no doctor. I only play one on TV.
Such a classic.
Yeah.
We go back to, this is actually where we get the board scene, because we go back to them betting, and now it's like we're then piecing it together because we've seen both sides of it now. Of like, we're betting on something we don't understand. They go into a room where there's a bunch of stuff that we don't understand, and then they read from a diary, and then whenever they come back, they're like, okay, who's the winner, guys? Oh, it's the guys who chose the zombie redneck torture family.
Not before we show hand burst out of the ground.
Yes.
So
which we do end up getting a semi callback to at the very last second of the film,
which is fantastic.
Yes,
but
very good.
the hand popping out of the ground is so iconic to what a wonderful visual to have coined so long ago, because is a hand bursting out of the ground, that's a zombie.
Yeah,
that's what these are. You don't have to explain it any further. It's a hand burst out of the ground, they're undead. Fantastic.
Yeah, this is also where
Drew Goddard.
There's this amazing, there's this amazing like little moment between Truman and oh my God, I can't remember the character's name right now. But they're discussing like, because he's like, what are these, like nightmares, monsters? What is? And she's like, no, these are things from nightmares. And she says, no, these are the things that nightmares are from. Or no, it's, did I say that?
I believe that's it.
And that was so poetic. She's such an amazing way. Cause like, these are the things from the ancient world.
Right.
So then we get another reference to, okay, so there was a world before this one where all of these things existed. And he even came in and he was like, monsters, magic. And she's like, yeah, you get used to it.
The first time I watched the movie, I assumed that it was, they had created these things because it's a high-tech laboratory. So it's easy for you to assume that these things are created. This watch through, my assumption is that they are of the supernatural. They are professional in the face of the supernatural. So what they have done is collected a menagerie of things to do these rituals with.
I would imagine that they would have been given to them in some type of way, you know, by either the ancient ones or maybe, you know, how long is it that they've been doing these sacrifices? Were these things that have been passed, you know, down the generations of the folks who are overtaking this ritual? How, you know, exactly how long have we had them in, you know, our possession here type of deal. That's kind of the vibe that I get, at least.
They also discuss at this point, they show us that a bunch of other rituals are going on. So the only one that's left now is the one in Kyoto.
We get
a couple of clips of that one.
So sad.
And
just a bunch of little kids being chased around by like a grudge monster.
Right.
Well, that's exactly,
Because it's very much supposed to show the difference in kind of horror tropes for different countries, different nationalities. Because the things that, you know, they find scary in Japan is different than things that we find scary here.
Well, then it shows Sweden's failed attempt, and it's like a giant antlered troll laying, like, I think that's in Stockholm. Like, it is huge and smashed into like a building because they've obviously bested it. But that's of their tradition, the frost giants and, you know, Jotunheim and whatnot. Obviously, that's the horror that they're pulling from.
Yeah. This is where I would say we enter Act 2, and that's where everything then kicks off with the zombies are out and people are getting murdered and chased around.
Which I do find kind of weird that all of those what do they call them? The torture.
Zombie redneck torture family.
That's it. Okay. So they are zombies at the end of the day. I think that's the most important part of, that list, well, that and torture. But have you noticed that they, it stands out.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that like all of the kills that they had were made with tools? Like they weren't coming in and biting. They were
No.
using knives. They were using garden shears, like just random tools.
Yeah, because I guess they're a torture family
Right.
first because that's
Zombie
what they loved,
second.
and then they became zombies, so they came back to life.
You would
But they
imagine that
still-
zombie would override.
Right.
Right? But no.
Well, it depends. It depends on how they were brought back. Because are they brought back from like a virus or like evil, like simple voodoo spells? I'm thinking flesh eating. But if I'm thinking like Latin raising from the dead, I'm thinking they're just back to exact vengeance.
I guess.
But I agree that makes them less zombie. Zombie
It
kind of speaks to
was.
mindlessness.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of thinking. They almost seemed calculated. So I was like, okay, all right. Well, and that might just be my own narrow view of what a zombie could be, because we end up seeing in what's that movie with Will Smith?
I Am Legend.
I Am Legend.
That's more
where-
vampire zombies.
Are they? I
like a
always
bit
looked
of
at them
both.
as like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess they're allergic to the sun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's fair.
I love the
But
term
they seem-
allergic there. That's fantastic. It's true.
Well, that's kind of how they behave. Yeah,
Would an EpiPen solve that?
I think so. They're far too expensive though. How could they afford it?
Oh.
No, but I agree.
It was just something that stood out.
Yeah. This sequence here is where we get a lot of we see just how much of like what they can control within the control room.
Yeah.
Yes.
From, the temperature of the world.
Yes.
So cool. So cool.
They send out a pheromone mist
Yeah.
that I love because it kind of plays into the idea in horror movies where you're outside and there's fog.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's like,
well, and
okay, so
really
that's the
quickly,
trope we're playing with.
before we move into this, because this is an important scene, but just a quick aside. Randy, goddamn, Marty says something interesting. Kurt is walking, Chris Hemsworth's character is walking out of the house and he's like, I'm gonna go bang my fucking girlfriend. And Chris Hemsworth's accent is everywhere in this movie, by the way.
This scene, they've truly become all of their stereotypes.
Yes,
Yes,
fucking.
100%.
I keep wanting to call him Marcus because that's his character in Detroit Become Human. But that guy, man with freckles, has glasses on now. And then Kurt is wearing a fucking Letterman jacket.
Yeah.
She's changed and is basically wearing nothing. It's very Friday the 13th
Very
remake.
Daisy Dukes.
Yeah. And so he's leaving. He's like, whatever, egghead. I'm going to go bang my girl.
Right.
And he leaves. And Marty's like, he's
like
a
a
sociology major and he just
Right.
called him an egghead. What the fuck is going on? And it's just another one of those moments where it's like, oh yeah, don't get swept up in this. This is weird.
Yeah.
And I just love his character for that.
Yeah. Marty says, we are not who we are.
Which is a reference to Help Me. X-Files. They say that in the X-Files. That is a very important line that they bring up at the very beginning of that series. And that stood out.
Really quick as an aside for Carly, do you remember in our episode 0, I mentioned that the theme music for Zombies Ate My Neighbors will give me shivers. If she hears the X-Files theme song, she it's near panic.
Oh my God, I poop my pants every time. I hate it. Fun story. My dad loved the X-Files when I was a kid. Loved it. Would watch it every single night. The same way that we watch Drag Race here in the house every night. X-Files. And I remember we lived in a 2-story house and my dad would turn it on and he would crank it so that I couldn't escape it. I would run up the stairs and then do the classic kid thing of running into the room, slamming the light on, and then jumping onto the bed and turning around to see if something followed me into the room.
Now, you'll recall last
Awful.
week in the beginning of our episode, I discussed how my mom was a wonderful, caring, beautiful
Thump, thump,
psychopath
drag.
who used to, Thump Thump Drag. That was our cold open
That's
last
right.
week.
Hilarious.
And so she used to scare the fuck out of us. Well, apparently we just have that in common. It's just her dad, my mom, used to go, ha ha ha, our kids can't sleep because Oz.
Loved it.
We don't have developmental issues at all.
That's right. We don't need therapists
We're fine.
for the plot.
At all.
As PJ mentioned, Kurt and Jules have gone off to
Breathe in pheromones being pumped from the ground to make them do the sex.
out in the woods.
Oh, they
and
turn up the moonlight too.
They do. They turn up the moonlight indeed. And we get that hilarious bit of like she's about to undo
it's
her
so
shirt,
good.
and then we cut to
Yes.
the control room filled with men,
Oh yeah.
and they're all just staring up at these giant monitors, just hoping to see And then she's like, it's cold. And they're like,
Amazing.
"Aw." And then they like force them out of the room. Marty and Richard, I can't remember his name. No, that's the actor's name, Richard Jenkins. Anyway,
Well, and they say this hilarious line while they're leaving the room. They're like, you and your disgusting necessary human needs. Because it does.
Yeah.
It kind of calls back to like, yeah, everybody is hoping to look at some titties here. And yeah,
Of course, that's obviously your favorite thing in every horror movie.
it sure is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I look forward to it every time.
We mentioned this briefly, but the original name for this show was Newbie and Schmoobies, Groovy Movies with Boobies and Doobies on Tubi. Really, the main focal point is that last one. We're trying to get that sponsorship.
That we are.
Please, if you're listening, hashtag third channel on Tubi. We want a sponsorship. But the boobies part of that, that comes from you.
It sure is.
Comes from you and Dylan. Originally, I was going to say 50-50, but I don't think that you're willing to accept 50% of
I'm certainly not. No.
So, wait, 70?
Yeah, I'd say 70-30.
Okay, 70% of the reason we have boobies in our original title is because of Carly's love for horror
Let's
movie
do 80. 8 looks like a set of boobs.
Oh, she's an expert. She's got them. She loves them. Expert.
Yes.
But yeah,
That's all it takes.
Well,
That
and
is-
that's an important it's an important remark to make because they are a staple in horror films.
They sure are. Yeah.
Which is
to the point where one of them, this is about where we begin to find out what the ritual is.
Yeah.
That you have these young people that have been through chem departments and through, research and whatnot. They mentioned at one point that they are lowering her cognitive abilities through essentially poison in her hair dye that is absorbed slowly through the blood. And it's making her stupid. Jules is becoming a stupid person as a result of this.
a dumb blonde, if you will.
Somebody remarks that it's funny because it fits the stereotype. So they start becoming their stereotypes, and we kind of get an idea that the ritual has to do with who you are.
Yeah.
And after the reveal of really what that means, it becomes much darker. And then it begins to fracture your understanding of this genre we love so much in its entirety. And essentially, Jules and Kurt are in this meadow with these pheromones being pumped into them, and they are beginning to be
Amorous.
a sexual couple. And we cut kind of close to Jules' hand is like on the grass, and then a fucking rusty old knife goes right through the hand. And it leads to that character being pulled from Kurt, who's also stabbed, and she's pulled. And the Buckner family in its majority is standing there, revealed for the first time. Kurt starts to freak out. And then very reminiscent of the 2022 Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's got chainsaws in it. But instead of it being a chainsaw, it's just a big old fucking saw.
Yeah.
Like a two-handed, like oak tree saw. And they just take her fucking head off. And it is the first kill. It's kind of bad.
And this is like 45 minutes into the movie. Our first kill.
Yeah.
No. And again, I think the reason you're so gripped is the questions to answers ratio. It's, well, no, I still really want to know what this is.
Yeah.
But then solemnly, and this is my favorite sequence in that underground work facility. It's my favorite sequence that's like cynical or dark, is they walk up and there's behind the major work desk is this like these wooden shutters. They look like kitchen pantries. And he opens the first one and it's like this weird handle. And he pulls the handle down after Jules is murdered. He pulls the handle down and it cuts to like a very 13 Ghosts sort of weird mechanical gears and everything is shifting and changing. And then blood is smashed out of a vial and poured into a big bowl. And it fills like a cutout of like a girl.
We don't fully see what it is at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of this is still mystery to us watching the movie in real time.
Which is a fantastic mystery because it's, something happened when she died. So so they are killing them.
It's a totally different tone
Right.
that they take on too.
Because they stop being funny. The people in the underground stop being fun. And it's a really good tonal shift is after that happens, one of them takes a necklace and it looks like a pentagram and like whispers into it almost like a prayer and kisses the pendant. And it's like, oh no, this is whatever humor they have found in this. This is an incredibly dark.
It's like paramedics or
Right.
doctors having to, see people in their worst.
Or even my dad, for goodness sake, he has to deal with that. He's got a pretty, not to get too much into his business, but he's got this contract right now where he is picking up every single homicide that is happening in Tampa. So all of the most gruesome things that are going on, he's having to do that. He's having to pick them all up. He has to go grab them. And some of these things are just horrific. I would never say them on the air, but like, goodness gracious, I don't know how he sleeps.
No.
Like, it truly is one of those things where it's like, hey, are you okay? Like, are you all right?
But like, his ringtone is For Whom the Bell Tolls.
It sure is, because he finds that grimly appropriate because it is.
You have to. Honestly, that's a really good example. Is I think eventually your mind is at the breaking point and it's, nope, I have to make myself laugh.
Some kind of levity.
So they take bets and they make it childish and they make it seem like it's not a big deal, but it's that solemnity of that, pulling the lever and then the prayer. It's like, oh no, there is remorse. There is a reservation to this. And we see that later,
and you get to see Truman's reaction to that as well, because up until that point, he was kind of looking at it as like, barbarism. It's like, oh, why is everyone behaving like this? This is disgusting. And then everything tones down real heavy. And then you see him and he was like, okay, wait, hold on. This is something.
Yeah,
this
we're
is something
taking this
big.
seriously now.
Right.
before we jump too far ahead, something else to consider is that we've already heard voices kind of being pumped into their atmosphere.
Yeah.
In the cellar, before she reads the Latin, Marty rightfully is like, don't fucking read that. And then a voice says, read it out loud. And it's
Which
like,
he seems to be the only person that hears that, by the way.
and it's like, did no one fucking hear that?
Yeah.
And it says that, and it's very funny because, again, a trope that's established in Evil Dead a lot. In Evil Dead, as they approach the cabin, in all iterations of that film, they hear voices. Things talk to them. And so then Jules has just been murdered. And you cut to Marty, who is in his room, who is trying to smoke away his anxiety and is sitting there struggling with being in this creepy place that he now feels uncomfortable in. And then he hears a voice that says, go for a walk. And he's like, no, fuck you. Don't tell me what to do. And it's just him standing there, puppeteers, man. And it's just, it's that insanity behind his eyes, but it's sad because he's right.
He goes out for a walk because the voices tell him to.
And
he claims to make that of his own volition.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's very much, well, I want to, but not because you said so. It's very funny.
Yeah.
And I love it because he's out pondering and you see in the far distance, Anna, the Buckner girl, creeping up behind him, and she's in the light, in shadow,
it's my
in the
favorite
light,
fake out.
in the shadow. And it's like, oh no, Marty's going to get it right here. And then he's basically rushed past by Kurt, who, having just watched Jules be murdered, they run back into the cabin. Marty does see some of these, zombie Buckner family members. And so they have a story to corroborate, and they're like, we got to lock that door. We got to, bad things are outside.
Yes.
We need to eat. We need to get into a room. We need to barricade it, and we need to make sure that we have to watch each other's bags.
Well, and before that happens, if you'll remember, Chris Hemsworth's character goes to do that. And then all of a sudden, which I think is another callback to maybe he was given a direct message the same way that Marty was given some.
It's
I think
like
this
air.
was specifically
they
for
like
him.
pump something in through the air duct.
So then he immediately almost drugged. He just turns around like, that's not right. And then it changes his entire tune. Well, we got to split up. And then Marty comes in with the great, are you serious? Why would you do that? That's a standard trope, is never separate,
40% of every episode that we recorded about Screams 1, 2, and 3 is talking about how fucking funny the Randy, why is no one listening to me bit is. It is something that makes those movies so spectacular. So to see that kind of trope happen again, but so much more dire, and Marty's is because, again, he smoked himself above the clouds. He's like, well, no, I mean, come on, guys. But then you've got the Buckner smashing through the front door, and you've got a good head prop.
Yeah.
Good fake head.
Yeah,
Jules' head gets thrown in. Looks a lot like the actress. So if that was, it might be digital, but it didn't seem like it.
No,
I
that
think
looked practical.
that's a prop.
Yeah.
They split up. They get locked in all their rooms.
Yeah, which was scary. Like, going back and watching that again, I cannot imagine. You put yourself into the character's shoes. character
Exactly.
shoes. And you kind of, you sit in that for a minute and it's like, oh my gosh, how is it that I would react in that? Because you can't get out. You know, the only other way to be able to get out is the window, which goes directly out to the threat. So
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing is the giant metal door. Like you feel like the whole wall has solidified the door, and you're like, oh well, shit, I can't get out of there. Now, if there were no window and there were zombies outside, it's like, oh okay, well at least I'm a little safer now. But there's a fucking window.
Yes.
So it's like, oh no, now my back's against the wall.
I'm screwed. Which almost, you know, seems like, because they probably would have had the cat in the bag at that point. Like, oh, we got everybody locked in their rooms. There's 5, I think, members of the Buckner family.
Yeah.
That's more than enough to wipe out these last 3 or 4 characters. 4 characters at that point, because it was just Jules.
Yeah.
So, you know, at that point, when I was watching the movie the first time, I kind of hung up my hat. I was like, okay, well, that's that. Because how is it they're going to be able to get out of this?
Yeah, they mentioned something about the Buckners have a 100% success rate.
Right.
And speaking of the 100% success rate, it is assumed at this point that they have gotten Marty.
Right. Yeah.
That Marty gets dragged out, and we assume he's dead.
Yeah,
Well, we
in the
see
room,
a massive blood splatter.
Yes. He finds a hidden camera in his room, and then they're about to like gas him basically. And they're like, nope, never mind. Anna's going to take care of that for us. And she bursts through, pulls him out. Actually, it's one of the others that does it.
Yeah.
And he gets stabbed in the back and then dragged away. And then
I think it's June is the name of the other one that grabs him. But yeah, you see like a little spurt of blood.
right.
And so
off
they
screen.
pull the thing. The blood drains down into the mechanism.
And now we see.
That's when
Yeah, because then
an earthquake
right.
happens because
They're wise to it. They know.
yes.
Yeah.
The ancient ones know that Marty isn't actually dead. Now, on a first watch, we, the audience, are not supposed to necessarily piece that together, but I love it on a second watch.
Well, they even say, I think earlier in the film, I think it was I'm pretty sure it's Wendy. I might be wrong, but I think it is, where she says, you know, the ancient ones know everything. They can see everything. So it kind of sets up that precedent of, they're omniscient.
Yeah,
they can see
to some
everything that's
degree,
going on. Right. So they've got a pretty good handle on what it is exactly that's happening with these people. So yeah, because that makes it even more scary. Because then you remember that, you're like, oh God, no. Well, and then it kind of like exposes a little bit of the gravity of what it is that they're capable of.
Well, and then you've got the earthquake scares the fucking Jesus out of everybody who's on the ground.
Oh yeah.
So it makes their situation all the worse.
Yeah.
And what's funny is like it shakes not only up above in the cabin, but down below as well. So it's like everyone is feeling this, and I don't know if they know, because it's the guys in charge down there. They don't seem to be. They believe that Marty is dead.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and they're
it's a
like,
shock
oh, they
to
must
them.
be having a good time. You know, they like being able to see this. It's a show. When, you know.
Holden and Dana, they break through the two-way mirror and then through the floor drop down into what is revealed to be the black room.
Yes.
Which was a torture chamber for the torture family.
Or a torture chamber for the Cenobites to use. Or a torture chamber for like any one of anything.
That's the other thing is like, if this plays out in a different way, how do they use the same props, the same areas at the cabin for the other creatures?
With general horror cliche, a torture room fits almost anything. And maybe the molesting tree, you have a hard time, unless the ghost that's in the molesting tree was tortured.
Right.
You know.
But then maybe, okay, say it was the tree. Okay. Maybe then they don't do the things that make them go into the room and down into the black room. They force them out of the cabin into the woods so that the tree can get them.
And
I
then
think it's more of
Deadites.
like a choose your own adventure where they kind of skip you past all of the other possibilities because it's no longer pertinent to the choice that you've made.
Yeah.
Which is a life and death choice that you don't know that you're making. And that's horrific. Because the movie comes off as funny, but when you think about it, the fact that going down and playing with an artifact is how you die. And you have no way of knowing that.
Right.
It's fucking terrifying.
Yeah, awful.
I
Which
love,
makes it so good.
Yeah, that truly is.
So good.
I love, so they're down in the black room and they're being still attacked by one of the Buckners. He throws down one of their weapons of choice is like a bear trap on a chain.
Super cool.
Yeah. Holden gets attached by this bear trap.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then he is winched up back to the ground floor.
Yeah.
And I'm writing this note as you go, oh my God, like Mrs. Mac from Black Christmas, where she gets fucking yanked through the cellar. And I have written, oh my God, Marcus from Detroit Get Human just got Mrs. Macked.
Dana stabs the Buckner at that point with several things like a crowbar and a knife or a
Torture
trowel, and they kind of get away. As she's one of my favorite little details is she's holding that knife, and either Richard Jenkins or the other guy, they push a button and it gives her a little electroshock, and so she drops the knife.
Yeah,
and because it's very much the trope of like, you know, Laurie Strode stabs Michael Myers, and then before she leaves the room, she just drops the knife on the floor, and it's like, well, why would you do that?
I like how she doesn't even think twice about it too. Like I think she's so overwhelmed by what's
and
happening.
probably on a lot of drugs.
So she, you know, she gets that little electric shock, which is very transparent to us. You know, we can see that, but she doesn't even bat an eyelash. She's like,
No,
okay,
not at
yep,
all.
that's out of my hand now.
What's funny is that the obvious Michael example is something that I mentioned this in a cold open. She and I saw Patton Oswalt, and he watches Halloween with his daughter, and his daughter was like, stab him again, pick
Yeah.
the knife up off the floor. And so seeing that's all I could think of is, you know, his voice, stab her again. It's just so funny.
That's why I always loved Zombieland, because you
Yeah.
know the list of rules. That I think that's the first one is double tap.
Double tap.
So like that, it kind of solidifies that
You know
trope
all about
of
that. PJ?
What is that movie called?
Zombieland.
And what does the Z stand for?
Zombie.
Well, this has just been the fucking... No, I'm not going to keep doing the cold open here.
This is around the same time that it is revealed that the Kyoto plan has completely failed.
Yes.
Yes.
That
And in the cutest scene in the movie.
Oh my gosh,
What little babies?
so sweet.
They have defeated evil and driven the long black-haired demon girl into the body of a frog.
Now, Carly
Little happy frog.
is a mom.
Sure.
Carly was also what modern scholars would call a latchkey kid. So she spent a lot of her
Barefoot
time
baby.
outside with dirt under her fingernails. So there are two things that Carly loves: babies, little kids, because she has a little kid, and frogs.
Oh.
Because like she'll go outside and she'll catch a frog and she'll smooch it and she'll release it.
Well, and no one else is going to do it. You know,
Yeah.
that frog will probably go its whole life without getting a single kiss. And it is my mission in this life. Every frog that I come across is getting a smooch.
Not every frog is as salacious or scandalous as Kermit. So the fact that
I'm just hoping one will play a banjo for me.
the fact that these cute little kids turn a demon into a frog, that's perfect for her.
Loved
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Checks every box.
That's part of the movie.
That's true.
Except Willem Dafoe's not there.
Oh, Willem Dafoe is a frog. I'd smooch that frog. Oh, I'd smooch that frog with tongue. I do it.
Okay, and all right.
we gotta keep going.
You're the molesting tree.
We're gonna run away from that conversation like they run away at this point from the cabin in the RV.
You're
segue.
so good at segue.
I
That's very
try.
good.
They're driving away in the Rambler. I now have it in my notes. That's what they
good.
call the RV.
Okay.
Really quickly, another note that I had about this scene specifically is they're in the dark. They're trying to get away from monsters at night. They do that by hiding in an RV for just a moment to collect themselves. They get in the RV, they close the door. And that made me think of a TV show that plays exclusively on MGM Plus. The show's called From.
Great show.
Yeah, I can't speak for it. I haven't seen it yet.
I know her, and I know that even though she is not a part of the production of this show, she still wants to plug it.
Oh, I sure do. Everybody go watch From.
It's good horror.
Oh, it's incredible.
It's very suspenseful. It doesn't follow my formula of question, ask, answer, question, answer. It is question, 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 answer. So it's a little frustrating if you're
Sure
like that.
is, yeah.
All the problems that you have with Lost, you're going to have with this show.
Well, it's the same showrunner, Damon
It sure
Lindelof.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Harold Perrineau does a fantastic job as a lead in that show. Boyd, he's fabulous.
But yeah, that reminded me, it's the bus. Eventually in that
Yeah,
show, there's
yeah.
a bus and they hide out in there for a sequence.
It's very important.
And it made me think of that in
Yeah.
this very similar lighting, very similar kind of threat. So
Yeah. With them trying to, escape. They're driving on that mountain pass again, and they're going to have to go through that tunnel, obviously. And that's when they realize that the tunnel is still intact.
yeah, the demo team, I'm air quoting, hasn't blown the tunnel, hasn't caused the collapse. I'm air quoting again. So as they make it in the Rambler through the tunnel, they're like, well, fuck it. And
We're Richard Jenkins's character, he goes running to the demolition department to fix this problem. And so you get this amazing scene where you're cutting back and forth between the two stories and the two groups of characters. And in a weird way, you're rooting for both of them.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'll be happy either way.
Yeah.
And we don't even know the stakes.
No,
we don't
not
truly get them.
Well, I think I probably pieced together the first time that I was watching it. It's like, well, that tunnel is the only way out, and due to their reaction, it's like, oh god, oh no,
Like, they
fucked up.
can't
like,
leave.
Yeah, like this is bad news bears,
And because we know that Japan has failed,
yes,
they're the last
thing.
ones.
That's exactly right. So there's that thing of like, oh my god, now I am rooting for this guy. Like, oh, you better collapse that tunnel. Like, it's something bad's gonna happen if you don't.
And in a weird visual symmetry of like, they're in this old, a cliche is the car not starting. They're in this old RV. It starts, they're getting away. There's no problems with it. Yeah. So then in the inverse, the people that work in this high-tech underground laboratory have to like hot wire the explosion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Point.
But then it does work and it goes off and they are forced to back out. And this leads to the funniest sequence. When I think of this movie, I think of this sequence. This is such a good moment because it's like the level of ridiculousess of their idea, their harebrained idea is, well, we can't get through the tunnel. And they're all on these drugs that make them act like fucking morons. So Chris Hemsworth is like, well, I got this dirt bike. And they've shown that dirt bike. Every time they show the Rambler, they show the dirt bike. And he's like, well, I'm going to just ride over the canyon. And then Holden, with his fucking glasses, runs over to the edge. And he like, by my calculations, if you do this much, and it's like, bullshit. None of that's real. None of that makes any sense. But they're all just like, okay,
this
go
is our
for
only
it.
chance.
And so Chris Hemsworth's like,
here's the thing I will say. He gives like the most heroic speech before this jump.
Oh yeah.
Of like, I am going to make it.
I'm going to come back with help.
If I flub the landing, I'll limp my way to town. I'm going to come back with the cops, the army, the
helicopters, guns.
everything.
Guns.
I'm going to save us.
Yeah.
That is the thing that got him Red Dawn and probably what got him Thor.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Do you know what it gets him in Cabin in the Woods? Not a lot. He doesn't come out on top. It is the...
In fact, he comes out on the very, 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 very,
the
very bottom.
Marianas Trench. It is so funny because the three of us are watching and we know what's going to happen. So we're all already going... Here it goes. And then he does. If you remember earlier on, the hexagonal patterned energy wall that the bird smashes into, he rides the dirt bike up the mountain and then back down it and he jumps it. Now, here's the thing that always tickles me. Because for the record, he does not make it across. He slams into the wall of energy. His bike immediately explodes and the burning shrapnel and his dead fucking body hit the wall over and over and over. And he falls for like 15 seconds.
Which apparently was like an effect that they had to fight for because it's a digital effect. Every time that he hits that wall and there's the big sparks and everything, that's costing more money. And so they were like, no, we need to sell the fact that this thing goes all the way down.
Well, and that's the idea that I got was that, this goes all the way down, presumably maybe to the ancient ones.
Oh,
and
yeah.
maybe I had thought maybe this was from an earlier, ritual, something had happened and the ground split. That's kind of the idea that I get is that it kind of looks like that.
I hadn't thought of that because it is like a net for
it's weirdly
that area.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is so funny how hard we all laughed because it is just the explosion and it is like 6 stories that it is still tumbling.
Well, and the thing that adds to that so much is, he clears the actual, edge of the cliff, right? So his bike is now off of dirt and in the air. And we get this gorgeous shot where it's very wide, where you see one side that he's supposed to be landing on, the side that he's launched from, and he's gracefully flying through the air. And it's like, oh, he's going to do it. He's going to make it. And then immediately smashes against the wall. So
The funniest thing too is you mentioned, I had forgotten about the bird.
Yes.
And it's like, me too. And Derek was like,
so much has happened.
That is the hope.
It's like the conversation.
right.
Yeah.
They say that in the commentary that it's like, that's the hope.
Oh, it
that
worked.
you have forgotten about the bird. But we did want to put that in early so that you go, what the hell was that? And then forget about it later.
So that you're like, oh shit, that's
He's gonna
right.
make it. Oh no.
The thing and the thing that I mentioned earlier about holding on to that I think is so funny is I doubt completely that if that energy wall weren't there, that he still wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, right.
He still would have crashed and died.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a ravine. It's a huge distance. And they're just like, it is them being so stupid in this movie because you understand why they're being stupid that makes it funny.
Right.
And him just being like, I'm going to come back with guns, with the army, with dogs, with everything.
We're getting closer to his face as he's doing this. Like it's just zeroing in on him.
Music swells.
Yeah, very emotional.
And the other thing that's so goddamn funny about the sequence, by the way, is the crash cuts to silence.
It does.
It's just smashing down the wall.
That's right.
And then it cuts to our other characters, or what we think are our only survivors. And they're standing looking, and you can see the orange glow from the ravine on the front of their faces, and they are silently just like, well, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the phrase, fuck you in particular. Like this poor Kurt watches his girlfriend get her head chopped off. He runs and he immediately gets drugged into faux pas bravery that he then assumes gets Marty murdered, and then he dies per basically Phantom Menace droid shield death on motorcycle.
At this point, Dana has almost taken over from Marty in the I can see the strings.
Yes.
Marty was right.
Well, she's even like, at one point, it's the crash on the wall. She goes, puppeteers. And it's like, yeah, you should have listened to Randy. I know it's not Randy, it's Marty, but it is Randy in our hearts.
Yeah, always. And so she and Holden are back in the Rambler. They're going back to the cabin. And she's like, well, why are we going back? There's, nothing back there for us. And he's like, no, I'm going to keep going. There's got to be another road, another trail, another whatever. We're got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And they're having this moment between them of we are going to figure this out.
Well, and she's wise to the fact that they're going to end up nowhere. They're going to drive and drive and drive, and they will never get out.
Which is very much a Evil Dead of someone goes out into the woods, an awful thing happens to them.
We
they
have
come
a
back.
phrase now. They meet the molesting tree.
Yep. And then whenever they come back and they're like, the woods are not going to let us leave.
Yeah, we can't go through there. And
It's horrifying.
But the other thing that I love so much is that this is the second back-to-back rug pull of our heroes are going to make it. They have a plan they're going to execute. Bike explodes. Oh shit, what do we do? Fuck it, let's go right through. We're going to get out the other way. We're going to see what's through the other way. Stabbed through back of chair. And it's like Holden, who is driving, is killed by a Buckner who we do not know is in the RV.
There is a hint.
It looks like
at
they're
that.
on the outside of the RV, it looks like. Because it almost seems like it bursts through the driver's window and then...
It comes through the back of the seat. It almost it stabs him through the throat, basically.
okay.
But we get a hint at that whenever they first get into the RV and they drive away from the cabin. Whenever they close the door, we push in and there's a bloody handprint on the outside of the door.
I missed that.
So yeah, it's a very brief setup for that.
sort of. Yeah, but so then the Rambler goes now off the path into the water.
Yeah.
Which they then celebrate in the underground of I don't remember what they call it.
What do you mean? Basically, they start celebrating and the security guard, Truman, is like, I don't understand. Why are we celebrating? She's still alive. And they're like, well, because the ritual, the rules is that the first 4 have to die. The virgin's death is optional as long as she's last.
What I'm referencing is they're like, one of them's like, oh, I wish I could do what you do. It's art. And then one of another employee is like, oh, and when it gets into the water, and they use a term that I can't remember. It's something like spectacular or something, but they're like, when it hits the water, it's amazing. And it's like, oh, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
Well, and then we get that second callback to that character who's like, you know what? This is just part of the job. I love it, but I do think it would have been cooler with a merman.
Yes.
And it's just like, all right, cool. So we've now made 2 different references to the merman, and
well, and that's the other thing.
fucking loves this thing.
Is and that guy is talking about when they're in the cellar to cut way back into the movie, and it's Kurt who has the conch shell, and he's about to blow into it, and he's like, and he sets it down. And later on, they reference it like, he was so close.
Yeah.
He was going to do it. And they're like, we know, bud. We know. And he just loves the fucking merman.
Because I think that's the idea is maybe every year that's his vote. He's like, I just want to fucking see a merman.
Yeah.
Like,
But
so he puts it down every year.
Yeah, but you never get it.
Yeah.
he has a meeting with like a little catch up with Demo, and they're talking about like, hey man, you really screwed us back there. Now I'm just playing with you. You know, we got it all figured out. It's fine. And the demolition team is like, I'm telling you, man, that was a glitch. That wasn't our fault. There's been weird stuff happening here tonight. Again, we don't know it the first time watching it, but that is Marty messing with wires and stuff, because he has figured out what's going on and has found the panel under the grave.
Okay. That's a good point.
And so Dana crawls out of the lake. She's on the little dock there, and the Buckner comes out and
Bear
he
Trap
starts,
comes out, and it's Papa Buckner.
as he loves to be called. And that's when, so they're watching that happen. They're celebrating. They have that little exchange of like, no, that's not our fault. There's a glitch in the system. And then the red phone on the wall rings.
Yeah.
And the guy who to this point has been nothing but funny is like, everyone shut the fuck up, turn the fucking music off. Like something, it is immediately transparent by the way the party in that room dies.
Yeah.
That's bad.
And he has a conversation. I don't believe we hear what's coming from the other side, but it's just well, no, what do you mean? Well, no, they all died. Nobody got out. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Well, which one? And they start clicking around to the cameras. And that's when we go back to Dana, about to be finished off by Papa Buckner. And as he swings the bear trap back on the chain, it wraps around
the fucking coffee mug bong. The $5,000
usable prop.
Yes.
Well, and I love the symbolism behind the red phone, because I wanted to check and make sure that I was right about this, is that has always been a metaphor that's been used for a way to be able to connect to God. Like that has always been the image, is the picture of the red phone. So having that be the thing, and I'm assuming it's the director that's on the other end, right?
Yeah, and you've got like the crisis phone in the Oval Office that's red, and then the mayor and Powerpuff Girls had the red phone.
Yeah, but like that is as far as I know, that has been the longest standing photographic metaphor that we have since the conception of the red phone, that is supposed to be calling to a higher power. That's always what it's been connected to. So the idea of this red phone, which is such a stark color to be sitting in this very gray and white room, it immediately stands out like that's dangerous. Like, what is that?
Well, and what's funny is that they haven't really shown it to this point. I'm sure it's been in the background of certain shots, but it doesn't stand out at all.
No,
so
not
it
at all.
going off is, we are now being introduced to it at the same time that they are remembering this is something that they work next to.
But then the way that he immediately changes his demeanor. It's like, oh, this is serious.
Yeah.
And we know that immediately.
But yeah, Marty has
is
survived,
alive.
and he has apparently just been fucking around, and he's been chopping up zombies. He has been playing with panels, and he believes he has found an elevator.
Now, I love this because whenever they run back, they, Dana's following along behind Marty, and he opens up this grave and he starts going down under the ground. And she's like, what? And I love the fact that they have to, in order to find salvation, they have to descend into this grave.
Yeah.
And that's revealed then into this, brick room where he's got a panel off the wall, and there's like pieces of a zombie on the floor, and he's like, I had to dismember that guy with a trowel. Like he's just
So what have you been up to?
Completely cracked.
Yeah.
That is a good line.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to after he's like darting from corner to corner? You also have to remember that he was the person that found the cameras. So
Yes.
he's probably under the assumption that he is constantly being monitored.
Oh, yeah.
And he's piecing it all together. He opens up the elevator underneath them, and they jump down in there.
And the fucking plop of part of the zombie that he is vivisected slopping into the elevator, and he's just like, ugh.
I also love the realization, because she's like, do we want to go down? And he just kind of looks around for a minute and looks back at her, and he was like, where else are we going to go? Yeah. And then it really does kind of solidify that, oh, they're screwed. If they stay on the top level, they're fucked. They're never going to get anywhere. At least here, if they go a little bit, below, maybe there's another way out, going through that way. But it's so much more dangerous. It's an entirely new playground that you're unfamiliar with.
And thank God they do.
Yeah.
Because it leads to one of my favorite visual effects shots of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the elevator, we slowly get reveals of other things in boxes around them, matching elevator boxes.
So
the
good.
big one, and it moves like a Wonkavator. It moves up and down, left, right. But the big revelation happens when Dana sees what is essentially this universe's Pinhead. It's a big guy in leather with stuff in him, like razors and shit. And she sees that he's holding that sphere, that puzzle sphere, and she connects the fact that that was in the cellar. So she's like, she comes up to the conclusion, oh my God, we did this. Yeah. We picked.
We had to choose.
And then it's this amazing shot of her coming to terms with this and losing her fucking mind as the pieces all move around this wall of elevators, this Rubik's Cube of all of these different glass displays of cliché monsters. And some of them are strange. There's like Japanese businessmen with masks and then like clown family. And like you mentioned, it was like a robot scorpion with like BattleBot buzzers and shit. Yeah. And a lot of weird stuff. But then there are things that you immediately recognize.
Yeah. You see the clown at one point.
Yeah.
And I do kind of like the symbolism of, you know, when we get that pan out moment and all of the boxes start kind of collecting in because, you know, they're specimens, you know, of their own kind. And there's this line that's from Series of Unfortunate Events when Uncle Monty dies. And it's said in the book too, where he's almost become a specimen himself after he's been killed by Olaf. And that's kind of the same vibe that you get with them in the box. It's like, okay, now you guys are kind of part of this bigger collection, which is pretty interesting. And
because like the whatever the underground, whatever the collective or whatever you want to call them, like they view these things as tools. Yeah, they are the most important tool that they have. They're the thing to make the sacrifice happen.
Well, and she's losing her shit too. So like you're panning out as she's sitting there banging on the glass and screaming. So she looks kind of insane while she's doing it too.
You
so
pan
it's like
very far out.
Oh yeah.
Well. Yeah, you're as you're zooming out and everything's shifting around them and everything. It's very much that showing the whole menagerie there, but it's very much to show that they are surrounded. Yes. They are completely trapped at this point. But this was still their best option somehow.
Yeah, very Matrix in that kind of sense, where you know it's in that scene where everybody is, you know what I mean, or you don't go watch The Matrix,
a movie I haven't seen.
That is insane.
So then you don't know what I'm talking about.
No, there are a lot of revelations like that in this show.
Much like the camera transition from earlier, where we go from the cabin to the control room. We then go from the control room. Once they find them in the elevator, they know which elevator they're in. They're like, get them out of there. Yeah. You know, kill him. She can live. Or if you have a clean shot, you can get them both. Yeah. We just got to end this thing. Basically, is they're in you know panic mode at this point, and so you zoom back through a monitor into the elevator with them.
Very good.
And it stops, and one of the guards bursts in, and they get a little help from the zombie arm. Yeah. Thankfully.
Which, by the way, this is the easiest death in the entire film. All they did was grab his head, smash it against the back, boom, he's dead. That's it. That's all it takes.
Just drops. Yeah. Then you start hearing the voice of presumably the director. Yeah. And something that the director says is, it is our task to placate the ancient ones. Again, we're reiterating, and we still don't know what that means exactly. But they're being surrounded, they being Marty and Dana, they take refuge in this little control room in a bank of elevators, this like lobby. And they begin looking at the panel. Yeah. And there's a big red button in the middle that's like system purge. Yeah. And
what a necessary button for this type of place, right? Because that's something you would ever want to do.
Yeah, I have that in my notes. Carly shouts, "Why would there even be a fucking button for that?"
It's a valid question. Why would they do that?
Yeah.
And it's not under like glass or anything. There's one little switch that you have to switch, and then you can hit the big red button. Yeah. And it lets everything loose.
And we see the ripping robots or whatever they're called, giant bats that remind me of like the bats from like Mirkwood from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. You see the molesting tree.
The molesting tree.
Yep, it's there. Yeah. Grabs somebody, runs away.
I mean, there's...
Well, who knows what it does with that guy?
I'm rooting for it, though.
Oh, that's good.
That was my ass clapping, by the way.
Oh my God.
That was a snap.
Speaking of the tree, it grabs somebody, pulls them into one of the elevators, and then a huge geyser of blood shoots out. Very Evil Dead.
Very, very Evil Dead.
You get the dragon bat, which eventually smashes through the window of the room that they're hiding in, and it's this awesome it's
like a predator.
bottom jaw,
Like mandibles instead of a mouth. Yeah. But you get
giant spiders, giant snakes,
a multitude of zombies.
Yeah.
A ghost that
the wraith.
swoops past somebody and looks like it pulls their soul out of their body, but then their soul looks like electricity that then dissipates into the air. And it's like, did that thing just pull that fucker's soul out?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
You get
It's like the devil.
you get things like, an evil clown. You get people that are just referred to as the doctors. They look like, evil surgeons carving people up. You get the Fornicus is his name. He's he's basically the pinhead in the Cenobites. You get people who are wearing masks like the strangers.
Yes.
So you get all of these kind of classic things running around. But I mean, what are some of the other things that we see there? Jack-o'-lantern guys.
Yeah.
Scarecrow men.
Yeah. A unicorn at one point.
Yes.
You do. Yeah.
And then you get
in the TV monitor of the elevator where you see the doctors originally, there's also and you guys had read this individually, separately, but there's on one of the screens, blink and you miss it, are 2 Ku Klux Klansmen
in full regalia.
Yeah.
I think that's really important because, you make all the references to the classic types of monsters that you would see in cinema, but you got to remember there are real world monsters as well. And I think it's kind of important to kind of lump them in there because it's like, these people are monstrous.
Well, and what that reminds me of is American Horror Story Roanoke, wherein the storytelling is about, the
Scary
way
racists.
people would be treated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So, but you do see Klansmen, which is horrific. And then you see... as soon as the elevator doors have opened, it is just thrashing. Everything's moving. Everything's ripping. There's blood everywhere. People are screaming. People
But
are
the
getting...
shot is so still.
It
You're just sitting
hangs
there.
Yeah.
It's great.
Because it is such a quick shot, but they want you to be able to they don't want you, distracted by camera moving or anything. Let's lock this thing down.
Yep.
We'll have the doors open on either side. Things will come out. People will get completely demolished.
Yeah.
It's just a bloodbath. It's amazing.
Well, and we see the different monsters in different places, as they're running through the hallway, because they then have to run away. And so they're running through the hallway, and you see this fucking woman get pinned against the wall, and she's stabbed by a unicorn 8 times. And it's just Shadowfax, no. And it's just so good. And then you get to everyone's favorite scene in this movie.
Right.
Where the seeds have been sown.
Yes. We're in the control room.
Yes.
And the door, the big vault door has been bursting in eventually. Something's been banging on it from the outside and denting it in. And that's where the Scarecrow guys come in. They attack Truman.
Yeah.
And pretty immediately begin to dismember him.
Yeah.
Like the painting. They just start to pull him apart.
Yeah.
That's a good pull there. Steve, who's played by Bradley Whitforth, he is the one who has always wanted to see the merman. He's using an Uzi to shoot a giant tarantula. And then when Truman sets off,
it's a little confusing visually, but
I assume in his last ditch effort to take care of at least these scarecrows that are killing him, he was going to die either way. So might as well blow him up with the grenade.
And in the explosion,
Steve,
falls to the ground and is a little hazed.
Yeah.
And he looks up. And there's these plapping sounds.
It's a very thick fog you're having to look through.
You called it, while we were watching it, you said that your favorite part of the sequence was, quote, the wet slapping sounds.
That's exactly what it was.
Because it's the merman who is, it does not look like Ariel at all.
Oh, no.
It is like this weirdly swollen, big-toothed, almost like an anglerfish monster with thick, black, straight human hair. And he's he looks over and he sees it, and it's coming out of the fog. It's beautiful. And he sees it and he's like, oh, son of a bitch. And it jumps on him and it starts to eat him. And then for no fucking reason at all, blood bursts out of its blowhole. in its back. And it's like an Evil Dead fountain of, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the off-watering of a jet ski. Like when a jet ski is running and it needs those ports to push the water out the back, but it's blood and it's from this disgusting fucking thing eating this character.
So what's pretty great is do you have a note about this by any chance? So the actor that plays the merman, he's a stunt guy, and his name is Richard Citrone. Kill me if I'm saying that incorrectly, because I might be. But he was actually in Army of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead in 2004. He was in a litany of other films as well, but those were the ones that kind of stood out. He was also in Batman v Superman. So there's that. He was also in Fight Club.
But that makes sense because those 3 movies are all directed by Zack Snyder.
Yeah. He was also in Thor. Before we move away from the elevator scene, because it's something that wasn't mentioned that I actually thought would be, they specifically, when we go back to the elevator for that kind of calm moment of the zombies, going in on some of the guards, and then we get that funny moment of the guts falling, on the left side of the screen and just plopping onto the ground, and then they kind of turn and look. That was specifically supposed to mimic that scene from The Shining, where it's the elevator doors are supposed to be like the hotel room doors down the hallway covered in blood. Like that's specifically what that was supposed to be a callback to. I looked it up.
It's funny. That's the second movie in our litany that has a obvious Shining reference. In Evil Dead Rise, a freight elevator bursts open with probably 1,000 gallons of blood. That pours out of it.
Yeah. Well, and then obviously you get the twins.
Yes,
And that's
another monster in this. Yeah.
You get a couple one-offs like that. You see there's a woman at some point very slowly walking toward a guy who's like crawling away on the ground.
Yes.
I don't know what or who that's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And when I first saw it, it looked like they were holding a briefcase, but it's actually a thing of gasoline, and they're going to burn that person to death.
Oh, okay.
What kind of degree burn you think you get with gasoline and a match?
At least a third?
A death burn for sure.
So she's giving him the 3rd degree.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, my God.
That's comedy.
So at this point, Dana and Marty have escaped down into a lower level of the facility that no longer has it doesn't look like a bank anymore.
And this is after they crawled through the wall.
Yes, thank you. I was like, how do they get down there?
From the dragon bat.
Yeah, that's right.
The dragon bat smashes a hole in the wall.
And so they go in, and now there's giant stone walls, and Richard Jenkins' character also climbs down like an emergency chute, and he's down there. And rounding a corner, Dana stabs him with the knife, the trowel, or whatever she had with her. Yeah. And he realizes, oh my God, you were the 2 that we're looking for.
Yeah.
And in the last plea, basically with his last breath, he just tries to warn Dana of kill him.
Yeah.
Because the whole ritual still can work as long as Marty dies.
Yeah.
And again, we still don't know what the fuck that prevents.
No.
We have no idea.
Yeah.
We just know that Marty needs to have his ass become grass.
But she definitely takes in that
Oh, for sure.
note from him.
She almost seems to kind of look at him distrusting, like, wait, why? How come? Like, clearly y'all know something. Why do I need to kill him?
Yep. And they go down this giant set of stairs into this big round room.
Very Temple of Doom. Very sort of like that, like an Indiana Jones sort of ancient chamber.
And it's surrounded by the 5
totems.
Yeah. Of the different
roles.
Thank you.
What I keep referring to it as.
Yeah.
Different stereotypes, the different characters.
And then you see that symbol on the ground again, the same one that they were wearing on their necklaces, and the same pattern that was on that wall, the invisible wall.
And they're basically trying to decide what they're supposed to do. And I believe Dana says they don't just want to see us killed. They want to see us punished.
Yeah.
And then we get the reveal of the director. And if you hadn't already told by her voice over the speakers, Sigourney Weaver is the director here.
Fantastic.
Amazing cast.
Apparently,
obviously she's good in everything she's in, but that sort of strong, quiet, very hard spoken, in charge of things powerful woman character is just like, if you have that, just cast Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, every time.
Yeah. That's who's going to be the best at doing that role.
Yeah. Apparently Jamie Lee Curtis was considered.
That's fun.
That's good.
And then also Sam Raimi was considered.
Oh.
And so that being the big thing, because the biggest reference that Cabin in the Woods is making is to Evil Dead.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's giving him that. But I am so happy that they went with Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah. I wouldn't have liked Sam Raimi. It would have needed to have been Ted Raimi.
Yeah.
Because Ted Raimi's everyone.
Right.
Ted Raimi's been playing Bruce Campbell the whole time.
He's the everyman. And by that I mean he is everyman.
Yeah.
The director then gives the final explanation of like what's been going on, that there are 5 archetypes that we're playing with here, and I'm using her words: the whore, the athlete, the scholar, the fool, and the virgin. And they Dana kind of immediately picks that apart of just like, well, I'm not a virgin. And she's like, well,
We work with what we have.
yeah, like, and they do everything that they can. That's why all of the, drugs and pheromones and everything else that they give them, all the things that they kind of control about the world to get them in their, to fit these parameters.
You got to do something. The whore has to take, to Carly's delight, has to take out her boobies, at least the
That's
ones.
right. She's got to do
Yeah,
it.
she has to die first. The others don't matter.
Yeah.
The virgin is optional as long as the other 4 die. And
I love that. There's that line that Dana says where, she's kind of recanting what it is that's going on here. And it's, oh my God, like, why us? Like, why did they want to see us punished. That's it. And then Marty comes in, he's like, why? And that's when Sigourney comes in and it's like, because of your youth. It's because you're young. That it doesn't matter what it is that, the ritual is involved. It just has to be someone young, which is kind of interesting. Like, I thought that was something like, why? How come?
Because boomers.
I think it's just to play with the stereotype of typically the slasher genre that we had known leading up through all of this is like the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the Texas Chainsaws. They all deal with teenagers. They all deal with college kids. They all deal with people in the prime of their youth.
Yeah. And then like, if you go back to like ancient, times, like there was, I don't even remember their name. There were several like child sacrifices that were done many years ago, like hundreds of years ago. Those were the pure ones. You would need to kill off one of these children to make sure you have a bountiful harvest next year. So I think maybe that's even a callback to that, where it's, the origins of sacrifice and the fact that this has been going on for so long. It's like, well, yeah, it's youth. Like that's where you got it.
Marty he says something along those lines of just like, so a ritual sacrifice, like just
grab a cloak and a dagger and yeah.
So they're piecing it all together, and the director then tells them basically, you two have to die in order to save the rest of the world. Because if we don't do this, the sun comes up in 8 minutes and everything ends. Yeah.
What I love so much too is that this is obviously meta commentary about what horror creators feel about giving their stuff to us. It's, well, no, this has to follow the formula, because this is what the ancient ones, this is what our audience, this is what they need. This is what they know. They are only happy if these things happen. And if we don't do it in the right way, we complain. We boycott, we hate. But if they do it in a way that's quick and efficient, we hate that also. So there needs to be the spectacle. It needs to be the same thing every time. Because if not, it's the fans of something are the worst part of that thing. And I couldn't help but feel that resonate of like, well, no, it has to follow the order, and it's because it's what they like. It's like, oh, we're them again, aren't we? Damn it.
Which is the big point of this movie. That the audience, that we are the ancient ones, that we demand blood. And the whole movie then is structured around the idea of what a horror movie is. You literally have the director is the director. You have Gary and you have Steve. They are like the writers. They are the ones that dictate what happens in the story. And when things don't seem to be going how they want, then they can change details and move them in another direction. Like you have all these different departments working together like a film crew to put this thing together. And that's what the theme of this whole thing is. And it's just holding, a giant mirror up to all of that. But then it should make us feel like you kind of hinted at there of like, should we feel a little guilty about that? That we have this bloodlust?
Yeah.
Well, that we have these characters that we like that are suffering at the whims of creators, and it's for our benefit. Their suffering, their hardship, their sorrow is because we enjoy it. We touched on this when we talked about Scream. It's like the only reason that these Ghostface killers are killing the people is because they want to revel in the violence of what actually happened in the first Scream movie with Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. And so the only reason that those kids get killed is because people want to recreate and recreate and recreate and do it over and over and over again. So all of these characters, no, they're not real, but it's still, we celebrate the violence. We celebrate the hatred, the murder. We love it. We are animals. We can't get enough of it. What Carly brought up that quote, I hate you for your human impulses or whatever he says. It's like, we have that. And so this is very much, well, no. Well, unfortunately, you know, yes, you've never done anything wrong. Yes, you're random, but yes, we have to kill you because if we don't kill you, we get in trouble. The world is in trouble. This microcosm of box offices and what studios can sign on which directors and yada, yada. That's all in trouble if people stop watching. So we have to just keep giving you your slop, essentially.
See, and that's a lot more of a sophisticated take because I did not look at it like that at all. You know, this is, and now that you guys have said it, it kind of shines a light on the entire experience. Like, oh my God, yeah, it kind of does just seem like a microcosm of the entire horror community, you know, as a whole. I had gone into it thinking more it was, you know, like kind of the Greek pantheon thing where, you know, back a very long time ago, that was the idea is you would have the Colosseum and gladiators to, you know, blood sport. That was a huge part of early human history. So now we have, you know, the safe way of being able to kind of ingest that. And that's through horror movies. And, you know, this is the way that we can still get that instinctual bloodlust that humans naturally have, but in a safe way. And
yeah, if you tied horror as a genre to football as a sport and made those things the same thing,
right,
you'd get everything that you needed. It's physical
absolutely.
contact, it's live, that's happening, but then horrific, bloody gore body parts everywhere.
But then that was the idea of, you know, the gods is they would watch these stories unfolding for humankind. Some of them, like Zeus, would come down and be like, well, I'm going to fuck everything. So we're just going to go ahead and create our own storylines here. But that was the idea is it's all for their pleasure. It's all for their, you know, viewing and all of that. So I thought that was.
Well, I always, in all of these movies, it doesn't matter what it's about. In any horror movie, in any, especially anything meta that references God in any way, immediately I assume that when they mention God, it's us.
Sure, yeah.
Because to the characters in a world like this, we are the pantheon. We enjoy their torture like hedonistic grapes, you know, and it's this is the one where it makes you feel bad. Scream makes you feel bad also because it's like, well, we're only doing this because people love blood, and it's like, oh, we do. But this one makes me feel a little bit worse because this makes me feel bad for the creators also.
Yeah.
Because like Wes Craven stopped making Scream movies because he just didn't want to keep making them, and he did it a long time later. But he took a long, you know, hiatus on it, and it's just that's what you hear. That's why people who make really amazing horror stuff step very quickly away from it. John Carpenter stepped away from horror almost immediately. Sam Raimi steps away from horror pretty quickly into his career. Fucking Jim Cameron's first movie that he ever made was a shitty fucking horror movie, and then he stepped right the fuck away from it. People, horror is just so demanding that it's had to fit this. Does it check all these boxes archetype? And if it doesn't, then it doesn't do well.
Work, yeah.
There are interesting horror premises all the time that you watch that just don't fucking do anything. Meanwhile, there are 12 goddamn Friday the 13th movies, and every single one of them, except the one where they go to space, is more or less the same.
Yeah.
It's because the one where they go to space is the best.
You know it.
The only version of that would be Muppets in Space.
Yeah.
Great
That was
film.
good.
Goody.
Basically, the only thing we have left is they decide not to kill each other.
Yep.
Thus,
Out of selfishness, very human trait.
It's like, well, to me, I always picked it up like, if humanity is so fucked that this is where we're at, that we're fine to just do this stuff all day long and commit these atrocities and whatnot, why the fuck are we going to die to save humanity?
I guess, but then you start bringing in, you know, moral ethics and the trolley problem, right?
It's
Is
the
there 5 people saving the entire world? Also, how interesting is it that, you know, right after this happens, after they decide, okay, all right, cool beans, we're just going to go ahead and sign our names off on this. start a new world or not, whatever. That's the end of this though, that when they start to come up, they come up through the cabin. Like that's like the portal to hell, which is presumably in the US.
Yeah.
Poignant, delicious.
That pretty much ends that. The biggest thing we need to, I guess, discuss more than that is something you brought up last week, which is, do we recommend this movie?
Yeah, we do. Even despite the fact earlier on we'd mentioned it's a feel bad ending in the very last visual, which is why I love the quote of, did you see the movie?
Yeah.
I know I'm not making a sequel. Is a hand the size of the forest smashes through the ground and just seemingly destroys the planet. Even with that feel bad ending, I would recommend it. I love this movie. I've seen this movie twice. It's fun to watch with your friends. It's fun to watch with people who love horror, because the first time you and I watched it together, and a lot of us watching this movie, and it's a trait you have that I love, and it also puts me on the spot and embarrasses me, is when she shows me something that she likes, she doesn't watch it with me. She watches me watch it because she's gauging my response. This one, we watched it academically. We watched it to discuss. So I didn't really get a lot of that, but it is fun. It's a fun movie to watch. This one's a good party movie. Like if you're inviting people over to watch a movie, this one's great.
Or like first date movie.
Because it's not horribly scary.
No.
Yeah.
But it's got some suspense. It's got plenty of humor.
Yeah.
But then it does have just those couple of good horror movies. Like I submit that Jules getting her head cut off is quite effective. I think that's freaky.
Yeah.
No, it has the moments where it needs it. It finds this perfect mix.
It's a perfect mix of beheadings and then motocross smashing into Hex Shield. It's brilliant. It's amazing. Carly, would you recommend Cabin in the Woods?
Every time. Yeah.
Now, when you talk about movies, you tend to talk about them a lot more detailed.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. And you kind of go through different films. You do that. Do you want to plug your channel? It's part of the per diem of being a guest, is you get to use our limited audience to plug your stuff.
Oh, please, by all means. If you're interested in hearing more about hidden details and Easter eggs in films, follow me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, wherever it is that you ingest your media, at Belle DeVelle. That's BelleDevelle. Belle DeVelle.
With that being said, if you haven't pieced it together, listener, she's the one that made our logo.
Yeah.
The Third Channel podcast that's in our artwork. So actually she gets a tag. You can follow her stuff right down there in the description below.
That's true.
You can link right to her.
What series are you working on right now? What Easter eggs?
I'm currently about to hop into a series about the Addams Family. There are a tremendous amount of things that are hidden in the early movies that were created by Barry Sonnenfeld in the early 90s. As well as the TV series that was released in the 60s.
Nice.
So it follows both of those things?
It sure does. And every new iteration as well. Because I think everyone that, gets their hands on this product, even some of the Wednesday series, Netflix's Wednesday, I think it's a passion project for anyone who picks up that title. Because, it's inspired from a comic that was written in 1933. And I think a lot of people don't even recognize that the Addams Family is that old. It's a 90-year-old family. And, people kind of come to it thinking that maybe the 60s television show was the very first iteration. It's not. It's long standing even before that. So there are a lot of love letters to the original source material that are put in, every iteration. And I would love to get into that because for whatever reason, that's untapped. It's just a gold mine sitting under all of us. So.
Famously on this show, I don't know anything about anything. So that was a fact that you taught me fairly recently, is that it was an old cartoon, an old newspaper cartoon. Yeah, give her a follow. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been very fun.
I'm sure this won't be the last time we hear from Carly.
No.
Oh, I'll be back for Chucky.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be back.
We'll be back probably for one of the sexier films in the series. So that concludes our talking in general about cabins and their many woods.
Wow.
With The Evil Dead and
That's
Cabin in the
true.
Woods. Yeah.
It's been so many weeks of cabins in woods.
No, next week with Chucky, we get to talk about dingy apartments, assumedly in Detroit or somewhere in Chicago because of Brad Dourif's voice. If you liked our discussions about, these cabins and these respective woods, feel free to reach out to us in any of the places that you can find us. Send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. And if you don't like our discussions about the cabin in the woods, then why the fuck are you still here?
Yeah, that is a good question.
Like if you're here and you don't like these discussions, get out. Go away. Thanks for tuning into the Third Channel podcast. Please, if you have the time, rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast apps.
You can follow us on social media at Third Channel Podcast, and you can find me online at @DRosenberg.
You can also reach out to us at thirdchannelpodcast@gmail.com, where we check every message, we swear. Third Channel is hosted by PJ Minette
and Derek Rosenberg. Theme song and audio engineering by Fly Guy Ty.
The logo designed by Belle DeVelle Co.
Episode artwork by Nathan Walkington.
Keep it tuned right here to the Third Channel for all things horror. And remember, don't touch that dial. Egg salad and eggs.